Tonight we're diving into 28 deep lore facts from the wizarding world of Harry Potter. There's a lot to explore here, but I'll keep the pacing gentle so you can still settle in and fall asleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Most people know the story of the boy who lived as a tale of a hidden school, a wand of phoenix feather, and a final showdown between good and evil. But if we peel back the layers of the narrative we think we know, we find a world constructed with the meticulous care of a master architect. The wizarding world isn't just a backdrop for a coming-of-age story. It is a living, breathing history that spans centuries, built upon the foundations of ancient bloodlines, forgotten laws of magic, and a deep-seated fear of the one thing no wizard can truly conquer: death. When we look at the lore of Harry Potter, we aren't just looking at trivia, we are looking at the soul of a civilization that chose to hide itself from the rest of humanity, creating a parallel reality where the stakes are not just political, but existential. Think about the sheer weight of the history that precedes Harry ever stepping onto platform 9 3/4. We often focus on the events of the late 1990s, but the shadows of the past stretch back much further. The founding of Hogwarts over 1,000 years ago wasn't just an act of education. It was an act of survival in an era where magic was misunderstood and feared. As the 4 founders, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin, weren't just teachers. They were the architects of a sanctuary. Yet even in that sanctuary, the seeds of the greatest conflicts in magical history were sown. The ideological rift between Gryffindor and Slytherin wasn't just a school rivalry, it was the birth of a blood supremacist philosophy that would eventually lead to the rise of the most dangerous dark wizards the world has ever known. This brings us to the central mystery of the series. Why does the wizarding world look the way it does? Why is it governed by a ministry of magic that seems more concerned with bureaucracy and secrecy than with the actual welfare of its citizens? To understand this, we have to look at the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy of 1692. This wasn't just a minor law, it was a fundamental shift in the way magical beings interacted with the world. It was a retreat. It was the moment the wizarding world decided that the only way to exist was to disappear. This choice created a culture of isolationism that allowed prejudice to fester and gave rise to the idea that magical blood was a precious resource to be protected at any cost. But beneath the politics and the history lies something much more personal and much more haunting. J.K. Rowling has often said that the central theme of the entire series is death. This isn't surprising when you consider the personal tragedy that shaped the writing of the books. Quote, "The loss of her mother just 6 months after she began writing the first draft infused the story with a profound sense of grief and a search for meaning in the face of mortality. This is why the most powerful magic in the series isn't a flash of light from a wand, but the ancient, sacrificial protection of a mother's love. It's why the ultimate villain, Lord Voldemort, is a man so terrified of his own mortality that he literally rips his soul into pieces to avoid it. The conflict between Harry and Voldemort isn't just a battle of spells, it's a philosophical debate about what it means to be human. Is it better to live forever as a monster, or to accept death as the next great adventure? The lore we are about to explore tonight goes far beyond the surface level of the films and the primary plot of the books. We're going to look at the etymology of names that reveal the destinies of the characters who bear them. We're going to examine the astronomical and botanical influences that ground this magical world in real-world science and myth. We'll look at the tragic history of Albus Dumbledore, a man who is often seen as a grandfatherly mentor, but who carried the weight of a dark past and a complicated relationship with Gellert Grindelwald, a relationship that nearly brought the wizarding world to its knees long before Voldemort ever rose to power. we will delve into the mythic origins of the Deathly Hallows, exploring the tale of the three brothers not just as a fairy tale, but as a roadmap for the series' ultimate resolution. We'll look at the symbolic nature of the Dementors, creatures born from the darkest depths of human despair, and how they serve as a metaphor for the struggles we face in our own world. We'll even look at the small, easily missed details, like the fact that Sirius Black was mentioned in the very first chapter of the very first book, years before he would become a central figure in Harry's life. As we move through these 28 facts, I want you to imagine the wizarding world not as a story on a page, but as a vast, interconnected web of memory and choice. Every artifact, from the Elder Wand to a simple deluminator, has a story. Every ghost haunting the corridors of Hogwarts represents a life cut short or a lesson unlearned. The history of this world is written in the scars of its survivors and the legacies of those who fell. It is a world where names have power, where memories can be extracted and viewed in a stone basin, and where the choices we make define us far more than our abilities ever could. So prepare to go deeper than ever before. We're going to explore the hidden corners of the Ministry, the ancient secrets of the Hogwarts founders, and the complex motivations of the men and women who shaped the 20th century of magic. Whether you are a lifelong fan who knows the difference between a monk's hood and a wolfsbane, or someone who is just beginning to discover the magic for the first time, there is something here for you. We're going to look at how a series of books, written in small cafes in Edinburgh, grew into a modern mythology that speaks to the universal human experience of love, loss, and the courage it takes to stand up against the dark. The journey ahead is long, and the lore is deep. We will travel from the snowy peaks of the Scottish Highlands to the hidden alleys of London, and back through time to the era of the Great Wizard's Duel of 1945. We will uncover the secrets of the Black Family Tree, the true nature of the Horcruxes, and the heartbreaking reality of what it means to be the Master of Death. This is more than just a list of facts. It is an exploration of the thematic architecture that makes Harry Potter one of the most enduring stories of our time. So let the world outside fade away. Let the sounds of the Muggle world disappear as we step through the barrier at King's Cross. The train is waiting, the castle is calling, and the secrets are ready to be revealed. We are going into the heart of the wizarding world, examining the institutions, the eras, and the mythic artifacts that define this extraordinary universe. It is time to look beyond the wand and see the magic for what it truly is. A reflection of our own world, seen through a glass darkly and illuminated by the light of 1,000 candles floating in the Great Hall. Throughout this deep dive, we will maintain a gentle, steady pace. Each fact is a stepping stone into a deeper understanding of this fictional history. We will look at how the structure of the magical government mirrors our own, how the education at Hogwarts is funded, and why the houses are more than just social clubs. They are manifestations of different facets of the human spirit. We will explore the etymological roots of spells like Avada Kedavra and the botanical sources that inspired the strange plants in Professor Sprout's greenhouse. We will see how the names of stars like Sirius and Bellatrix were chosen to reflect the celestial destinies of the characters who bear them. By the time we reach the end of our 28 points, you will see the world of Harry Potter in a completely new light. You will understand the weight of the crown Albus Dumbledore wore, the depth of the tragedy that fueled Severus Snape, and the true significance of the Battle of Hogwarts as the culmination of a century of conflict. This is a journey through memory, identity, and the power of choice. It is a story about the persistence of love in the face of certain death, and it all begins now. There is a curse in the wizarding world, so absolute in its lethality that it is classified as unforgivable. Avada Kedavra, the killing curse. It produces a flash of green light and a rushing sound, and whoever it strikes simply dies, There is no known counter-curse, no shield charm that can block it, no wound to heal. The moment the jet of green energy connects, life ends. That is the rule, the unbroken law of magical combat, a fact so certain that even the most brilliant healers and duelists accept it without question. Yet in 1981, in a small house in Godric's Hollow, that rule was shattered by a baby. The mechanical impossibility of surviving the killing curse is not just a matter of its power, but of its design. Rowling crafted it as a spell that bypasses all physical and magical defences. It does not behave like a cutting curse or a bludgeoning hex. It is a direct termination of the soul's connection to the body. The only known way to survive it is to somehow intercept or redirect the curse before it reaches its target, but even that is imperfect. When Harry Potter faced Voldemort in the graveyard at Little Hangleton years later, the cores of their wands connected through Priori Incantatem, but that was a unique circumstance involving twin wands and a deliberate spell clash. In Godric's Hollow, there was no one-to-one duel. Voldemort simply pointed his U wand at the baby and spoke the words. The green light should have ended Harry Potter's existence instantly. What made Harry the sole exception in history is a combination of three factors that have never recurred in magical history. First, his mother, Lily Potter, offered her life as a sacrifice, a deliberate choice to stand between Voldemort and her child. This act invoked an ancient protection, one that Voldemort did not understand because he'd never known love. Second, Voldemort himself had used Harry's blood to regenerate his body in the fourth book, which inadvertently tethered Harry to life as long as Voldemort lived. Third, and perhaps most critically, the curse struck a soul fragment that Voldemort had unwittingly embedded in Harry when the curse rebounded. That fragment, a piece of Voldemort's own soul, acted as a kind of magical lightning rod, absorbing the full force of the killing curse, while Harry's body survived. But in 1981, none of these later revelations were known. The wizarding world simply saw a house blown apart, a Dark Lord vanished, and an infant with a fresh scar on his forehead. That scar, the lightning bolt shape, became the most famous emblem in wizarding history. It appeared the moment the curse rebounded, and it never faded. For years, people assumed it was a purely physical mark, a permanent reminder of the attack, but its deeper significance was far more ominous. The scar was a Horcrux link before the term was ever defined. It was the physical anchoring point for the splinter of Voldemort's soul that had attached itself to Harry. In the books, Harry can feel pain in that scar whenever Voldemort is near or experiencing strong emotion. It serves as a bridge between their minds, a conduit for visions and thoughts that Voldemort never intended to share. Rowling later confirmed that the scar was never just a scar, it was the outward sign of an unnatural bond, a piece of dark magic that made Harry a living Horcrux without his knowing. The scar throbbed and burned whenever Voldemort's own scarred soul stirred. It was an umbilical cord of magic that tied the two together until the very end. When Voldemort's physical body was destroyed in that explosion at Godric's Hollow, the wizarding world entered a strange, uneasy peace. He did not die, his soul survived, disembodied and feeble, unable to act except by possessing small animals and clinging to existence. But as far as the Ministry of Magic and the general public knew, the terror was over. The Death Eaters scattered, many claiming they had been under the Imperious Curse. Voldemort's followers went into hiding, and the Ministry began a decade-long campaign to round up survivors and rebuild a stable society. The power vacuum left by his disappearance was not simply a matter of one Dark Lord falling. It meant that no single wizard could claim his legacy, because no one had the strength to unite his followers. There were skirmishes, isolated attacks, but no cohesive threat. The vacuum was filled with confusion, with suspicion, with a slow erosion of the fear that had once gripped the country. And at the centre of it all, an orphaned boy grew up in a cupboard under the stairs, unaware that his scar held the key to the most mysterious event in modern magical history. That boy would not discover his own fame until his 11th birthday, when he was told the truth, but the silence of those 10 years hides a crucial period of magical history. The Ministry tried to suppress any panicked whispers that Voldemort might return, and for the most part, they succeeded. The generation that came of age in the 1980s grew up in a world where the war felt like a distant story, but the vacuum was never truly filled. It was merely held open by a fragile peace, a peace that would be tested again the moment the Dark Lord found a way to claw his way back into a body. The scar on Harry's forehead was a ticking clock, a reminder that the bond had never been severed. Before we move forward in this timeline, we need to understand how the wizarding world managed to remain hidden from non-magical people for centuries, and how that secrecy shaped the very fabric of their society and their laws. The International Statute of Secrecy is one of the most foundational documents in wizarding history, and its creation in 1689 changed everything about how magic and mundane worlds interacted. It is a story of persecution, of flight, and of a choice to withdraw from the sight of humanity. That chapter is coming next, and it will reveal why the world Harry Potter grew up in was so separate from the one he was born into. The boy who lived, the one who survived the killing curse, left a vacuum in the wizarding world that would not be filled for more than a decade. But long before Voldemort's first reign of terror, long before the Order of the Phoenix or the Death Eaters, the wizarding world itself had been shaped by an even older, more fundamental decision, a decision to vanish. To understand why Harry Potter's story unfolds in a world hidden from ordinary human eyes, you have to go back to the years when witches and wizards lived openly alongside muggles, when magical families farmed the same fields, brewed potions in plain sight, and flew on broomsticks under a shared sky. That was the world before the International Statute of Secrecy, and it was a world that could not survive the flames of fear. By the late 17th century, Muggle witch hunts had reached a fever pitch across Europe and the British Isles. The burnings, the drownings, the trials by ordeal, they were not just hysteria, they were a systematic, brutal campaign. Wizards and witches, despite their powers, were outnumbered, and the magical community grew tired of burying its dead. Some, like the powerful witch Lisette de Lapin, barely escaped the pyre. Others were not so lucky. The magical population was being decimated, not because they were weak, but because they were divided. Some wanted to fight back, some wanted to hide, and a few even wanted to rule the muggles who hunted them. In 1692, the International Confederation of Wizards gathered in secret and made a choice that would define the next 3 centuries. They enacted the International Statute of Secrecy. The legislation was not a gentle suggestion. It was a binding, global law that ordered every magical government to withdraw from Muggle society, conceal all magical activity, and enforce that concealment with the full weight of their authority. From that moment on, the wizarding world went underground. But going underground did not mean disappearing. It meant building a parallel world, one that ran alongside the Muggle world, but invisible to it. Think of the Ministry of Magic, seated deep beneath the streets of London, accessible only by tapping a brick in a grimy wall or stepping into a telephone box that sinks into the pavement. Think of Diagon Alley, hidden behind the leaky cauldron, a bustling thoroughfare of wand shops, apothecaries, and bookstores that no Muggle could ever stumble into. Think of Hogwarts itself, a castle perched on a mountainside that appears to Muggles as nothing but ruins and warning signs. The wizarding world maintains an entire economy, a government, a legal system, a healthcare network, and an education system, all concealed by enchantments, misdirection, and the willing cooperation of the magical population. The Ministry of Magic regulates everything from broomstick licenses to dragon breeding, from the use of time turners to the careful modification of Muggle memories. Obliviators are on standby to erase any accidental witness. The Floo network connects fireplaces across the country. Gringotts, run by goblins, it safeguards the gold that keeps the economy spinning. Galleons, sickles and nuts, all forged in vaults that burrow miles beneath the earth. And yet, this hidden world is not a peaceful utopia. The very decision to hide created a deep ethical rift, one that never healed. On one side are those who believe in total isolation, that wizards must never interfere with Muggle affairs, that exposure would lead to another round of persecution. This is the official position of the Ministry, the stance of most ordinary witches and wizards. But on the other side are those who see the statute as cowardice, as a retreat from a rightful place. They argue that magic is superior, that wizards should rule Muggles for their own good, or that Muggles should be subjugated or even eliminated. And this is the ideology that gave rise to Gellert Grindelwald's global war and later to Lord Voldemort's campaign of terror. The battle between these two visions, between the desire to rule and the determination to remain hidden, has never truly ended. It simmers beneath every election in the Wizengamot, every death of a Muggle-born child, every whispered remark about blood status. The International Statute of Secrecy was meant to save the wizarding world, and it did. But it also created a cage. It forced the magical community into a shadow existence, always looking over its shoulder, always erasing footprints. It bred suspicion and paranoia, and it left an unresolved question that haunts every chapter of wizarding history. Can a world that hides from fear ever truly be free? This tension is nowhere more visible than in the history of magical education. Before the statute, wizards learned from their families or from wandering masters. Afterward, formal schools became essential to train young witches and wizards in secrecy. And the greatest of those schools, the oldest and most storied, was built 1,000 years ago, in a time when wizards still lived openly, before the fires of the witch hunts, before the need for any statute. That school would become Hogwarts, and its founding would set the stage for every conflict to come, including the one between the boy who lived and the darkness that refused to die. The story of that founding, of the 4 founders who each brought their own vision of magic and of leadership, is the next piece we need to explore. In the wake of the International Statute of Secrecy, the wizarding world had chosen to hide, to survive by vanishing. But long before that desperate measure, long before Muggles learned to hunt what they could not understand, something extraordinary was built in the Scottish Highlands. Something that would become the heart of magical Britain, a castle that was never meant to be found by anyone who did not belong. The founding of Hogwarts was not a single moment, but a pact, a legendary agreement between 4 of the most powerful witches and wizards of the 10th century. Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. They did not simply build a school, they created a sanctuary, a living fortress that would protect and nurture young magical minds for generations. Each founder brought a distinct vision. Gryffindor valued courage above all else. Hufflepuff championed loyalty and hard work. Ravenclaw prized wit and learning. And Slytherin, the most enigmatic of the 4, insisted on ambition and cunning. But the castle itself was their greatest shared achievement. Hogwarts was never a static pile of stone. It was designed to be sentient, to respond to the needs of its inhabitants. Staircases that shift direction when you're not looking. Doors that only open if you ask politely, or tickle a pear. Rooms that appear only when someone truly needs them. The castle remembers, and it protects. Its very architecture is a living enchantment, a maze of hidden passages and moving walls that can confound an intruder as easily as it can guide a lost first year. The founders understood that a school for magic could not be a simple building. It had to be as unpredictable and intelligent as the magic it taught. Yet even among these 4 great minds, there was a fracture, a deep ideological rift. Salazar Slytherin believed that only pure-blood wizards should be admitted to Hogwarts. He distrusted Muggles and Muggleborns, arguing that magical lineage was the only true measure of worth. The other three founders disagreed. Gryffindor, perhaps the most outspoken, stood firmly for the inclusion of all magical children, regardless of birth. The argument grew bitter. It became personal. In the end, Slytherin left the school, but not before he built something hidden. A secret chamber beneath the castle, the Chamber of Secrets, which would one day house a monster meant to purge the school of those he considered unworthy. That chamber, and the division it represented, he would echo through the centuries, a hidden wound in the very foundation of Hogwarts. The four houses were born from this alliance and this conflict, each house a reflection of its founder's soul. And to ensure that students were sorted into the right house long after the founders were gone, Godric Gryffindor took his own hat and enchanted it with a sliver of true intelligence. The sorting hat would read the minds and hearts of every new student, weighing their deepest inclinations and placing them accordingly. That hat still sits in the Great Hall today, singing a new song each year, and it carries within it the echoes of the four founders, their hopes, their wisdom, and their ancient disagreements. The castle itself would weather centuries of change, but the original pact remained. Hogwarts was always more than stone and magic. It was a promise that regardless of blood, regardless of background, any child who showed magic would be welcome. That promise was tested again and again, but it never truly broke. As the years passed, the four houses shaped generations of witches and wizards, each house nurturing different strengths. But how exactly does the sorting hat decide? What does it see when it peers into a young mind? The answer lies in the very nature of the founder's vision. And in the next chapter of this journey, Sorting the Soul, the four houses, we will explore the deep lore behind the houses, their symbols, and the subtle magic that chooses where a student belongs. The four founders built this castle out of stone and magic, a living fortress that would shift its staircases and hide its rooms to protect the students who came within its walls. But they also built something far more intimate and lasting, a system for sorting souls, a method of looking into the hearts of children and deciding not just where they would sleep, but which values would shape their entire magical education. And they did it with a piece of fabric that could see into the future. J.K. In the song it sang in the 4th year, it pleaded, "Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness. There's no guarantee that you'll be safe from danger or from pain. The hat knows the cost of the label, but the houses are not prisons. The archetypes are guides, not destinies." Harry himself possessed Slytherin traits. He was ambitious, he was cunning, he could be ruthless. Dumbledore noted this. The difference was his choice to value friendship and loyalty over pure ambition. And that is the deeper truth of Hogwarts. The sorting hat does not define you. It reveals where you might flourish. But the flourishing is up to you. The house system is a framework for growth, not a final verdict. And perhaps that is why the sorting ceremony remains so resonant. Even 20 years after the book was first published, it speaks to a universal longing, the desire to know where we belong, and the fear of being placed where we do not wish to go. Every child who ever watched the ceremony unfold on screen saw themselves in that moment of suspense. They asked themselves, where would the hat put me? And the answer is never as simple as a single house. As the first years file into the Great Hall, the enchanted ceiling reflects the night sky. The floating candles cast a warm glow. The hat begins to sing, its voice old and cracked, bearing wisdom older than anyone in the room. It knows each student by name, even before it touches their hair. It knows the futures that are still unwritten, and it will do its best to guide them, not to trap them. But the sorting is only the beginning. The real work of identity happens in the dormitories, in the common rooms, on the Quidditch pitch. And that last arena, Quidditch, is not just a game. It is a philosophy of competition, risk, and the strange alchemy of teamwork. Up next, we will explore the deeper meaning of the sport, that unites and divides Hogwarts, and why a game of broomsticks and balls reveals more about the wizarding world than any textbook ever could. The chapter title will be The Philosophy of Quidditch. The previous chapter explored how the Sorting Hat divides students into 4 houses that function as psychological archetypes rather than simple social clubs, and we saw the moral complexity of Slytherin House and the historical prejudice that shadows its members. But those house identities don't just shape friendships and rivalries in the corridors of Hogwarts. They also spill onto the Quidditch pitch, where house pride becomes a fierce, sometimes dangerous, expression of belonging. Yet Quidditch itself is far more than a school sport. It is a mirror held up to the entire wizarding world, reflecting its chaotic, violent, and deeply emotional nature. And the origin of this game, surprisingly, begins not with a committee or a ministry decree, but with an argument. J.K. Rowling has said that she created Quidditch after a personal argument about why sports matter so much to people. She wanted to embed real emotion into the rules, to craft a game that felt alive with the same irrational passions that drive us to cheer for our favourite teams in the real world. But instead of making a balanced, fair contest, she built something deliberately lopsided. The Seeker, whose sole job is to catch the golden snitch, essentially decides the match with a single catch worth 150 points. That means all the hard work of the chasers, the beaters, and the keeper can be rendered meaningless in an instant. This is not an oversight. It is a philosophical statement. The wizarding world, Rowling seemed to say, values the spectacular over the systematic, the individual over the collective, the thrilling finish over the steady accumulation of effort. And that philosophy, as we will see, runs through every layer of magical society. Now the golden snitch itself carries a symbolic weight that goes far beyond its role on the pitch. It was not always a golden ball with fluttering silver wings. Originally, the Seeker chased a real bird called a snidget, a tiny, fast and magically elusive creature with a remarkable ability to change direction instantly. Snidgets were prized for their feathers, which were used in wand cores and potions, but their use in Quidditch nearly drove them to extinction. Spectators would trample nests, Seekers would accidentally kill the birds in their frantic grabs, and the violence of the hunt eventually forced the ministry to intervene. The snidget was declared a protected species, and the artificial snitch was invented as a replacement. This history is not just a footnote. It reveals a dark truth about the wizarding world. Even their leisure activities are laced with a disregard for life, a willingness to sacrifice the natural world for the thrill of competition. The snitch, with its flesh memory and its golden brilliance, is a reminder of that cost. It remembers the first hand that touched it, which is why Seekers must handle a new snitch with bare fingers at the start of every match. It is a ceremonial object, almost sacred, born from a history of violence. The game itself is a study in controlled chaos. 7 players on each side, 3 goal hoops at each end, 2 heavy iron bludgers enchanted to attack anyone in sight, and a Seeker who often does nothing for hours until the snitch appears. Matches have been known to last for months. The famous record is a game that went on for 3 months, with players switching out for sleep and food, while the crowd dwindled and the score barely changed. That kind of madness is not only tolerated but celebrated. The wizarding world does not sanitize its sport. Injuries are common, dangerous bludger hits are part of the spectacle, and even the referee is not immune. The referee's job is to enforce rules that are often bent or ignored, and they have to dodge the same bludgers as everyone else. The whole affair is a testament to a culture that embraces risk, that measures heroism by how much danger one can endure, and that often finds its greatest joy in the most reckless moments. This chaotic, dangerous nature is not accidental. It is the soul of Quidditch, and by extension, a key to understanding the wizarding world itself. Magic, after all, is inherently unpredictable. Spells can backfire, potions can explode, and even the most skilled witch or wizard cannot fully control the wild forces they manipulate. Quidditch is the physical expression of that same philosophy. It is a game that refuses to be tamed, just like the magic that powers it. And the players, especially the Seekers, embody something deep about the wizarding psyche. They are lone hunters, scanning the sky for a tiny golden hope, trusting their instincts, and willing to risk everything for one moment of triumph. That is the same attitude that drives adventurers like Harry Potter himself, a boy who often rushes into danger with a vague sense of purpose and a hope that fortune will favour him. So when we look at Quidditch, we are not just looking at a sport, we are looking at a philosophy that values cleverness over consistency, bravery over caution, and the dramatic over the mundane. It is no wonder that J.K. Rowling channeled her own frustration at a real-world argument into this creation. She turned a disagreement about why sports are important into a living, breathing metaphor for an entire civilization. And the irony is that this wild, chaotic game is governed by a vast and often absurd bureaucracy. The Department of Magical Games and Sports, part of the Ministry of Magic, oversees Quidditch leagues, regulates broomstick specifications, and handles disputes that can drag on for years. That same ministry, as we will see in the next chapter, is a labyrinth of desks and policies that tries to impose order on a world that naturally resists it. The Ministry of Magic and Bureaucracy, a chapter that will take us deep into the corridors of power, where wizards argue over cauldron thickness and the proper handling of rampant horns, and where the very idea of controlling magic through paperwork becomes a comedy and a tragedy all at once. The Snidget, a small golden bird once hunted for sport in early Quidditch, was driven nearly to extinction by the time the game's rules were standardized. That near loss forced the wizarding community to confront something it often resists: regulation. The Ministry of Magic stepped in, declared the Snidget a protected species, and replaced it with the mechanical golden snitch we know today. It was one of the earliest examples of magical bureaucracy rewriting tradition for the sake of survival. But that is just a single thread in a vast tapestry of oversight, one that stretches from the humblest cauldron to the deepest vaults beneath Whitehall. The Ministry of Magic is not merely a government, it is the nervous system of the entire hidden society. Every spell cast outside a controlled environment, every magical creature glimpsed by a muggle, every broomstick sold in Diagon Alley, all of it flows through layers of departments, committees, and subcommittees. At the top sits the Minister for Magic, a position appointed rather than elected, advised by a senior Undersecretary and the Wizengamot, the Supreme Court and legislative body rolled into one. Below them sprawl dozens of offices: the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, the Department of Mysteries, and others too numerous to list in one breath. Each office has its own hierarchy, its own rivalries, its own quiet wars over budgets and jurisdiction. It is a world of memos, forms, and official seals, where even the most brilliant witch or wizard can be buried in red tape. But the ministry's central purpose, the reason it exists at all, is the maintenance of the International Statute of Secrecy. This treaty, signed in 1692, after centuries of witch hunts and persecution, forbids the deliberate revelation of magic to the non-magical population. Every branch of the ministry, from the Obliviator Squad to the misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, exists to enforce that single principle. When a flying car is spotted by a Muggle, it is the ministry that sends a memory modification team. When a rogue enchanted object ends up in a charity shop, it is the ministry that dispatches a confiscation agent. The entire edifice of magical society rests on the assumption that Muggles must never know the truth, and that assumption requires a bureaucracy vast enough to plug every leak. One of the most curious consequences of this secrecy is how magical education is funded. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry does not charge tuition. Not a single galleon, sickle, or knut passes from student to school. Instead, The Ministry of Magic allocates a substantial portion of its annual budget directly to the Board of Governors. This is not a matter of charitable generosity. It is a strategic necessity. A wizard who cannot control their magic is a threat to the statute of secrecy. A child left untrained might accidentally transfigure a neighbour's cat, or apparate into a crowded muggle street, or cause an obscurus. That rare and tragic condition where a suppressed magical child becomes a destructive force of pure energy. So the ministry treats magical education as a public good, a form of infrastructure as essential as roads or sewers. Every witch and wizard who passes through Hogwarts is, in a sense, a graduate of a state-funded institution, their robes and textbooks subsidised, their meals paid for by the collective purse of the wizarding world. This arrangement also explains why the ministry has such a strong hand in Hogwarts affairs. The school may be old and independent in spirit, but its purse strings are held by bureaucrats. When the ministry decrees that the defence against the dark arts position must be filled by a particular candidate, or that Dolores Umbridge must be appointed High Inquisitor, the financial leverage is always present, but it also means that no family, no matter how poor, is barred from sending their child to Hogwarts. The Weasleys, with 7 children and a single ministry salary, would have been ruined by tuition fees. Instead, their children learned alongside the Malfoys and the Parkinsons, creating a strange kind of equality within the castle walls. Even if the social divisions outside remained sharp. And then there is the Department of Mysteries. It occupies an entire floor of the ministry, a place so secret that most employees never see its corridors. It is the epicenter of research into the deepest, most dangerous corners of magic: time, death, and love. Time is stored in a hall of shimmering hourglasses and time turners, devices that allow a witch or wizard to loop backwards through minutes or hours. Though their creation is tightly controlled after the disaster of the first experiments, death is studied in a room dominated by a stone archway hung with a tattered veil, a gateway that whispers to the living, and through which nothing visible ever passes, except perhaps the voices of the dead. And love, the most elusive force of all, is investigated in a chamber filled with prophecies, those fragile spheres of recorded destiny that seem to hinge on emotional bonds and choices. The unspeakables, as the department's researchers are known, do not speak of their findings. They work in silence, prodding the boundaries of what magic can and cannot do, searching for truths that most witches and wizards would rather not confront. It is this ministry, with all its shadowy corners and quiet power, that shaped the world into which Harry Potter was born. And it is within that world that 4 students, bound by friendship and mischief, created something that would eventually become one of the most extraordinary objects of Hogwarts. A map that reveals every secret passage, every hidden room, every moving soul within the castle walls. A map that, unlike the ministry's endless forms and approvals, was built for pure, unlicensed rebellion. But that story belongs to the Marauders and the map. The Ministry of Magic, for all its hallways of paperwork and polished oak desks, had one blind spot it never quite managed to patch: the corridors of Hogwarts. And it was in those very corridors, long before the ministry's golden statues and fountain of magical brethren, that 4 students began to weave a secret that would outlast them all. You see, the ministry regulated everything from broomstick licensing to werewolf registries, but it could not legislate against rebellion born of teenage wit. And rebellion at Hogwarts in the 1970s wore a particular face: 4 boys, restless, brilliant, and bound together by a loyalty that would one day be tested to its breaking point. James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. The Marauders. Their names echo through wizarding history, not merely as pranksters, but as architects of one of the most cunning magical objects ever conceived. The Marauders are map, but to understand the map, you must first understand the raw material of its creators. James, the rich, cocky heir to the Potter fortune, blessed with speed and charm, and a fierce protective streak, that often masked itself in arrogance. Sirius, the disowned son of the noble and most ancient House of Black, a boy who burned his family's expectations and chose instead a dormitory in Gryffindor Tower. Remus, the quiet, bookish one, hiding a monthly agony that made him an outcast among outcasts, and yet the moral compass of the group. And Peter, the plump, nervous hanger-on, desperate for approval, the kind of friend you barely notice until it's too late. Together, they were more than a gang. They were a system of trust forged in the fires of a shared secret. Remus's lycanthropy was the keystone. In their 5th year, these 4 broke the oldest rule in the Wizarding medical code. They learned the truth about his transformations, and instead of recoiling, they decided to stand with him. James, Sirius, and Peter, through their own research and reckless courage, became illegal animagi. James transformed into a stag, Sirius into a great black dog, and Peter into a rat. In those moonlit nights, they ran with Remus in the Forbidden Forest, giving him company, control, and a sense of belonging the world had never offered. Their nicknames, Prongs, Padfoot, Moony, and Wormtail, were not just handles. They were badges of a pact that transcended the ordinary boundaries of magical friendship. But their mischief did not end in the woods. It bled into the castle itself. They knew the grounds, the secret passages, the trick steps, the hidden alcoves where prefects whispered and ghosts gossiped. And they knew that the only way to navigate all of it with impunity was to document it. So they began to draw, not on parchment that could fade, but on a blank sheet of thin, unassuming paper, layered with enchantments that would make a Jinx crafter weep with admiration. The Marauders map was not a simple diagram. It was a living, thinking document of the castle's entire infrastructure, enchanted to show the location and identity of every person within the boundaries of Hogwarts, even those under Invisity cloaks or Polyjuice potion. It required a password, a clever, unmistakable greeting, and it was guarded by insults aimed at any nosy intruder, especially one particular greasy-haired Slytherin. That's the part that always gets swept under the rug of nostalgia. The map's brutal, personal edge towards Severus Snape. The map did not just show the way, it showed contempt. When Snape tried to force it open, it called him names. It accused him of having a nose like a snake and a soul to match. Those insults were not random. They were a deliberate artifact of a conflict that ran deeper than schoolyard teasing. James Potter and Sirius Black had tormented Snape throughout their years at Hogwarts, and their cruelty was not limited to hexes fired in corridors. It was etched into the very magic they left behind. The map spoke their language, proud, vindictive, and blind to the consequences of their own power. They did not know that the boy they mocked would one day be the only defense between their orphaned son and the Dark Lord. They only knew that Snape was always there, hovering near the shrieking shack, desperate for secrets, sniffing around the edges of their group like a wolf at a lamppost. That animosity, bottled in ink and spellwork, passed to the next generation. When Harry Potter received the map from Fred and George Weasley years later, he inherited not just a tool of navigation, but a legacy of enmity. The map's insults to Snape were not just a funny detail. They were a prophecy of the deep-seated hatred that would continue to simmer between Harry and his potions master. Every time the map refused to show Snape's secrets, every time it dismissed him as a filthy half-blood, that was the Marauder's voice, frozen in time, speaking across a decade. And yet the map also contained a softer truth, one the boys likely never intended. It revealed loyalty. It showed Remus Lupin, even when he tried to hide. It showed Peter Pettigrew, sleeping beside Ron Weasley. A secret so terrible, it would eventually shatter the entire order of the wizarding world. The creation of the Marauders map was not merely a school project. It was an act of rebellion against the very structure of Hogwarts. The castle had been designed to protect secrets, moving staircases, vanishing rooms, portraits that carried gossip. The map turned that system inside out. It gave its creators total surveillance, total freedom. They could roam after curfew, spy on the faculty, avoid Filch, and orchestrate pranks of legendary scale. But that same power came with a cost. The map taught them that secrets are addictive, and when the war came, when the first war against Voldemort began to consume the wizarding world, those 4 boys, now men, carried their secrets into battle. Some of them died, some of them betrayed, and one of them, the quietest, would spend 12 years in Azkaban for a crime he never committed, while the true rat walked free, hiding in plain sight. The Marauders map remains one of the most intricate magical artifacts in the entire series because it is not just a map, it is a time capsule of friendship, spite, genius, and vulnerability. It holds the ghost of a stag, a dog, a wolf, and a rat, forever running through corridors that no longer remember their footsteps. And as the war that broke them grew closer, those corridors would soon fill with darker shadows. Shadows that would carry the war into the very heart of the school and into the souls of the children who walked there. That war had already left its mark on the wizarding world, long before Harry was born. It had shaped the parents who would never see their son board the Hogwarts Express. It had forged Dumbledore's resolve and twisted Voldemort's ambition into something beyond human. The first wizarding war was a storm that began not with a single battle, but with 100 quiet cruelties, whispered in drawing rooms, plotted in dark alleys, and festering in the minds of those who believed power was a birthright. The Marauders were its children, its soldiers, its casualties, and the map they left behind. It was the last message from a world that was about to burn. The Marauders had barely graduated when the first cracks of a coming storm began to show. The map they had created, a monument to mischief and rebellion, would eventually become a weapon in a war none of them could have fully imagined. Not in their worst nightmares, not in the most dangerous corners of the Shrieking Shack. By the mid-1970s, whispers had turned into screams. Their name was spoken less and less in public, and when it was, it came out in a hushed, trembling tone. Tom Riddle, once a brilliant orphaned boy with a hunger that went beyond ambition, had shed his past like a snake sheds its skin. He had renamed himself Lord Voldemort, and he was no longer content to be a shadow in the corridors of power. He wanted the light itself extinguished. The rise of Voldemort in the 1970s did not happen overnight. It crept forward like fog across a moor, chilling everything it touched. First came the disappearances. Witches and wizards who spoke out against blood purity, or who were known Muggle-born advocates, simply vanished. Their homes were left untouched, their wands snapped, their names removed from the ministry records as though they had never existed. Then came the murders. The bodies were left in plain sight, often with the dark mark hovering above them. A skull with a serpent for a tongue, glowing green against the night sky. The Ministry of Magic was slow to react, hampered by denial and bureaucracy. They called it a criminal uprising, a return of dark wizard gangs. They refused to name the threat for what it was, a war. And it was a war. A secret war fought in the shadows of Diagon Alley, in the quiet villages where magical families had lived for centuries, in the corridors of Hogwarts itself. Voldemort's followers, the Death Eaters, operated with terrifying precision. They were not just thugs with dark magic, though some were exactly that. They were neighbours, colleagues, even family members. The climate of fear that gripped Britain was not the fear of an invading army. It was the fear of trust itself. You could no longer be sure who was listening, who was watching, who would sell you for a promise of power, or for the simple safety of their own skin. The ministry tried to fight back, but their methods were clumsy and often cruel. They passed laws that restricted civil liberties, created an Auror task force that was stretched far too thin, and began rounding up anyone remotely associated with the dark arts. But they were fighting a ghost. Voldemort had no centralized location, no army in the open, no declaration of war. He moved through his followers like a whisper, through a crowd, and his reach extended into the very heart of the government. It was said he had agents inside the ministry, inside the schools, inside the Wizengamot. No one knew who to trust. In this atmosphere of paranoia and loss, A different kind of resistance began to form. It was not a movement of the ministry. It was not an official task force. It was a gathering of people who understood that the war could not be won by laws and procedures alone. They met in secret, in safe houses scattered across the country, in the back rooms of pubs that had seen better days, in the attics of family homes where the portraits whispered warnings. They called themselves the Order of the Phoenix. The formation of the original Order of the Phoenix as an underground resistance movement was the work of one man, though he would never claim credit. Albus Dumbledore, then headmaster of Hogwarts, had seen darkness before. He had faced Grindelwald, had understood the seduction of power and the cost of fighting it alone. He knew that Voldemort could not be defeated by the Ministry's slow machinery, nor by the lone heroics of brave individuals. He needed a network. He needed people who would share information, protect the vulnerable, and strike when the moment was right. The Order drew from every corner of the wizarding world. There were former Aurors, like Alastor Moody, whose paranoia was not a flaw but a survival instinct. There were healers, shopkeepers, professors, and housewives. There were those who had lost everything, husbands, wives, children, and had nothing left to fear. And there were the young, the ones just out of Hogwarts, who still had fire in their blood and hope in their hearts. James and Lily Potter were among them. So were Sirius Black and Remus Lupin. Peter Pettigrew too, though no one knew then what he would become. The Order's operations were dangerous and often heartbreaking. They smuggled Muggle-born families to safety, intercepted Death Eater attacks, gathered intelligence from deep within enemy ranks. They lost members. They lost friends. The faces at their meetings changed, disappeared, returned as ghosts. The war was not a series of grand battles. It was a grinding, exhausting siege on hope itself. And this war shaped the parents of the Harry Potter generation in ways that would echo for decades. The young men and women who fought in that first war were not prepared for what it asked of them. They were children of the peaceful era, raised on Quidditch matches and school feasts. Suddenly, they were asked to make impossible choices: trust or suspicion, love or survival, family or duty. The broken families began long before Harry was orphaned. Marriages shattered under the strain of constant danger. Parents sent their children abroad to relatives in other countries to protect them from the conflict. Some children grew up never knowing their fathers, who were killed in skirmishes that never made the daily profit. Others grew up in homes ruled by fear, where a knock at the door meant the end of everything. The war did not just take lives, it took the shape of what a family could be. The Longbottoms, Aurors, and proud members of the Order were tortured into madness. Alice and Frank Longbottom left behind a baby boy who would grow up in the care of a grandmother who had lost her son and daughter-in-law to a darkness that never lifted. The Potters would hide, move, change locations more times than they could count, until eventually they trusted the wrong secret keeper. The war carved scars into the very structure of the wizarding world, and the next generation would inherit those scars without ever understanding where they came from. But it was not all despair. The Order also forged bonds that would survive the years. The friendships between James, Sirius, and Remus deepened in the crucible of war. Lily Evans became Lily Potter, and her love for her husband and son became the one thing Voldemort could not understand. And while the war would eventually end in the most unlikely way, a child surviving a curse, a body left behind in a cottage in Godric's Hollow, the legacy of that first war never faded. It remained in the eyes of a boy who looked at his reflection and saw his father in a godfather who spent 12 years in Azkaban for a crime he did not commit, in a professor who carried guilt like a second skin. When you look at the wizarding world as it was in the 1990s, you are looking at a world still healing from wounds that had barely scabbed over. The First Wizarding War did not end with a clean victory. It ended with a mystery, a miracle, and 1,000 unanswered questions. Among those questions was one that would haunt the next generation. What is it that truly makes someone pure of heart? And what happens when that very concept becomes a weapon? That question leads us directly into the ideology that fueled the war itself. The next chapter of our journey will explore how blood purity became the central dogma of the Death Eaters, how it poisoned families and schools, and how it shaped the very identity of the wizarding world, for better and for worse. The First Wizarding War left deep scars across magical Britain. When Voldemort vanished after attacking the Potter family, the relief was palpable, but the underlying poison that had allowed his rise remained. To understand how a half-blood orphan could command the loyalty of pure-blood families, we have to look back at a document that codified the very idea of magical aristocracy, the Sacred 28. This was never an official ministry proclamation, but a list published in the early 1930s in a book titled Pure Blood Directory. It claimed to name the 28 truly pure magical families in Britain, those with no known Muggle ancestry for several generations. The list was a social weapon, designed to elevate some families and condemn others. The Weasleys were on it, which is why they were considered a pure blood family, even though their poverty and affection for Muggles made them traitors in the eyes of extremists. The Blacks, the Malfoys, the Gaunts, the Lestranges all made the cut, but the list was also a tool of exclusion. Families like the Longbottoms and the Potters were omitted, despite being old and respected, because of suspected or proven Muggle marriages. This was not a neutral genealogy, it was a political manifesto. It gave the pure blood ideology a formal shape, a canon of acceptable families, and it fueled the obsession with lineage that would later become the bedrock of Voldemort's recruitment. Now, the tragic irony here is that the family that most fiercely claimed pure blood supremacy, the Gaunts, were also among the most degraded. They were direct descendants of Salazar Slytherin himself, which should have made them the crown jewels of the blood purity movement. Instead, by the early 20th century, the Gaunts lived in a squalid shack on the outskirts of Little Hangleton, barely scraping by. Marvolo Gaunt, the patriarch, was a violent, arrogant man who valued his heritage above all else. He wore the Peverell ring, which he believed proved his noble blood, but he had no money, no influence, no prospects. His daughter Merope was the ultimate victim of this ideology. She was a witch, but her magic was suppressed by her father's cruelty, and she was treated as a failure because she could not perform magic without a wand. The Gaunts' obsession with blood purity did not elevate them. It isolated them, eroded their sanity, and left them destitute. Merope Gaunt fell in love with a handsome Muggle named Tom Riddle Sr., and she used a love potion to ensnare him. When she became pregnant and chose to stop dosing him, he abandoned her and their child. She died shortly after giving birth, leaving her son in a Muggle orphanage. That son, Tom Marvolo Riddle, would grow up to become Lord Voldemort. So Voldemort's own heritage was a direct product of the blood purity ideology. He was a half-blood, the child of a witch, from a decaying pure blood line, and a Muggle father who wanted nothing to do with them. And here is the deepest twist. Voldemort did not believe in blood purity the way his followers did. He knew his own mother was a weak witch, and his father was a contemptible Muggle. He did not revere pure blood as a source of magical power. He saw it as a political tool. By the time he gathered his first followers in the 1970s, he had learned to manipulate the pure blood family's pride and fear. He promised them a return to the old ways, where Muggle-borns were purged and pure bloods ruled unchallenged. He let them believe he was one of them, perhaps the heir of Slytherin. They never questioned his own half-blood lineage because he hid it so effectively, and because their ideology blinded them to the truth. The Sacred 28 became a recruiting list. The Malfoys and the Blacks saw Voldemort as the strongest champion of their beliefs, even though he intended to destroy the very families that had produced the list's power structure. The blood purity ideology, then, was a lie used by a half-blood to seize absolute power. It was a lie built on ancient documents and desperate pride. and the Gaunt family was its most tragic embodiment, a line so pure it rotted from the inside. The last male Gaunt, Morfin, died in Azkaban, and the last descendant was Tom Riddle himself. The obsession with purity had destroyed the family it was meant to protect. This is the backdrop that led to the war you already know. But Voldemort was not the first dark wizard to use such ideology as a foundation for conquest. Decades before he rose, a different figure had shaken the international wizarding community with a campaign that horrified even the pure-blood supremacists. That figure was Gellert Grindelwald, and his story is as much about the corruption of ideals as it is about power. In the next chapter, we will examine the duel that defined the 20th century, the relationship between Grindelwald and Albus Dumbledore, and how the blood purity ideology found a new champion in a radically different form. The ideology of blood purity did not spring from nothing. It was a weapon forged in fear, sharpened by ambition, and wielded by those who understood that the most dangerous magic is not a spell but a story. And no story in the wizarding world was more dangerous or more personal than the one that began in the summer of 1899, when two brilliant young wizards met in the village of Godric's Hollow. Albus Dumbledore was 18, freshly graduated from Hogwarts, his future shimmering with promise. Gellert Grindelwald was just 17, expelled from Durmstrang for dark experiments, carrying a vision of wizardkind's supremacy like a holy text. They met by chance, or perhaps by fate, and within weeks they were inseparable. They shared everything: ideas about magic, dreams of power, and a mutual fascination with the deathly Hallows. They believed they could overthrow the international statute of secrecy, establish a new world order where wizards ruled for the greater good. The phrase "for the greater good" became their motto, inscribed on a letter that Dumbledore later wished he had never written. But that summer ended in tragedy. A confrontation with Dumbledore's younger brother, Aberforth, over his sister Ariana's fragile condition. A duel, 3 against 1, and in the chaos Ariana was killed. The cause of her death was never clear, whether it was Grindelwald's curse, Albus's own spell, or an accidental blast from the girl herself. That moment shattered the friendship. Grindelwald fled, and Dumbledore spent the next half-century carrying the weight of guilt and a buried truth. He had once loved the man who would become the most dangerous dark wizard since the Middle Ages. That love, acknowledged only later by Rowling, is the key to understanding the duel that finally broke Grindelwald's power. For decades after their parting, Grindelwald built a following across Europe, preaching a new order of magical domination, using fear and seduction to gather followers. He stole the Elder Wand from the wand maker Gregorovitch, and with it claimed the title of Master of Death. By the 1940s, his influence had spread from Berlin to Prague, from Paris to London. The wizarding world was on the brink of a war that could have erased the fragile peace between magical and non-magical communities. And Dumbledore, the only wizard who could stand against him, refused, not because he lacked power, but because he feared himself. He had loved Grindelwald, and he knew that love could cloud judgment, that revenge could taint intention. He waited until 1945, the year the non-magical world also saw the fall of fascism, and there, in a legendary duel that reshaped the magical world's political landscape, he finally faced his former friend. The duel itself was not a matter of brute force, but of raw emotional confrontation. They met outside the village of Nurmengard, where Grindelwald had built his fortress. Witnesses said the sky burned green and gold, that ground split, that the very air tasted of lightning. Dumbledore wielded the Elder Wand, which he had tracked down years earlier, but never used until that moment. Grindelwald had held it for decades, and it was loyal to him. Yet Dumbledore defeated him not through superior skill alone, but because Grindelwald hesitated. In that moment, the wand's allegiance shifted. The Elder Wand recognized Dumbledore as its true master, and that is how the defeat of Grindelwald led to Dumbledore's possession of the Elder Wand. Grindelwald was captured and imprisoned in his own fortress, and the wizarding world breathed freely again, but the cost was immense. Dumbledore lost not only his greatest enemy, but also the last ghost of his youth. He never spoke publicly of what passed between them in that duel, but the weight of it settled into his bones. He became the most powerful wizard alive, yet he also became a man haunted by what he had sacrificed to achieve that power. The political landscape after 1945 was defined by the vacuum Grindelwald left. The Ministry of Magic in Britain, which had been on the verge of collapse, regained its footing. The International Confederation of Wizards honoured Dumbledore as Supreme Mugwump, although he turned down the offer. And yet, out of that victory came the seeds of the next war. The fear of pure-blood ideology did not die with Grindelwald, it simply relocated. A young half-blood named Tom Riddle was already at Hogwarts, absorbing the lessons of power and prejudice. Dumbledore saw the signs, but he was too burdened by his own past to act decisively. He had vanquished one Dark Lord only to watch another rise. What Dumbledore did not know, what he could not have known, was that the very objects that had drawn him and Grindelwald together, the deathly Hallows, would become the key to the final battle with Voldemort. The story of those three legendary artifacts, and the tale of the three brothers who once outwitted death itself, is not just a children's bedtime story. It is the deepest mythology of the wizarding world. And in that mythology lies the answer to whether a wizard can truly master death, or whether death will always have the last word. That is the chapter we will explore next. The Deathly Hallows mythology, where the lines between legend and reality blur, and where the greatest deception of all is the belief that power alone can save you. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. That duel between Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald, the one that reshaped the magical world in 1945, was fought with a wand of almost unbelievable power, the Elder Wand. The unbeatable wand, the Death Stick, the legendary object that Grindelwald had stolen from the wandmaker Gregorovitch decades earlier. But that wand was not just a weapon. It was one part of a triad of artifacts, so ancient, so deeply woven into wizardkind's oldest stories, that they had become more myth than history. And yet, by the time Harry Potter was in his final year at Hogwarts, those myths were walking the earth again. The Deathly Hallows. The story of the Hallows begins not with a war, but with a fairy tale. The tale of the three brothers, as collected in a volume called The Tales of Beedle the Bard, is one of those stories that every magical child grows up hearing. It tells of three brothers who cheated death while crossing a treacherous river, and who each received a gift from Death himself in recognition of their cunning. The Elder Wand, a wand that could never be defeated in duels. The Resurrection Stone, a stone that could bring back the dead. And the Invisibility Cloak, a cloak that could hide its wearer from Death's own gaze. The story ends with two brothers meeting their end at the hands of Death's own cleverness. But the third brother, the humble one, evaded death for many years before finally greeting him as an old friend. But what many wizarding families forget, or perhaps never knew, is that this tale is not just a children's fable. It has roots in ancient wizarding folklore stretching back before the founding of Hogwarts, likely originating in the same oral traditions that gave rise to stories of the Sorcerer's Stone and the Philosopher's Stone. Beedle the Bard wrote his tales in the 15th century, but the three brothers themselves, if they ever existed, are thought to have lived in the early Middle Ages. Their names have been lost to time, or hidden perhaps, because the true believers in the Hallows have always kept the secret close, because the Hallows are not merely legend, they are real, and they were scattered across the magical world, waiting for someone to gather them. Now, here is where the deep lore gets truly fascinating. The Hallows and Horcruxes represent two radically different philosophical responses to the same universal fear. the fear of death. Voldemort, of course, chose Horcruxes. He tore his soul apart, piece by piece, and anchored those fragments to objects and living beings. He did this because he wanted to escape death, to become immortal, to never feel the weight of mortality pressing down on him. But that path came with a terrible price. Each Horcrux demanded murder. Each act of soul-rending deformed the soul further, until Voldemort became less human, more wraith, more fragmented. He was not mastering death. He was hiding from it, using his soul as a hostage. The Deathly Hallows offer a completely different philosophy. The Hallows are not about escaping death. They are about mastering it. The legends say that the one who unites all three Hallows becomes the master of death. Not someone who cannot die, but someone who accepts death on their own terms, who has learned to face the end without fear. The Elder Wand grants unbeatable power in duels. Yes, but power that eventually turns against its owner, as history repeatedly shows. The Resurrection Stone does not truly bring back the dead. It summons shades, memories, echoes of those who have passed, and using it too long can drive a person mad with longing. And the Invisibility Cloak, the third brother's cloak, is the only Hallow that does not fade or tear with age. That cloak is unique in the entire wizarding world. Most invisibility cloaks are made from the hair of demigwises or from enchanted fabrics, and they all lose their power over time. They become opaque, develop holes, or lose their ability to hide the wearer from magical detection. But the true cloak of invisibility, the Hallow, is different. It is eternal. It never fades. It cannot be pierced by revealing charms, not even by the summoning charm. It was the cloak that Ignotus Peverell, the third brother, passed down to his descendants, generation after generation, until it reached Harry Potter. Harry's father James owned it, and then Harry himself inherited it, and for years, Harry used it as a clever magical tool, never realizing its true significance. That cloak was not just a useful object. It was a masterwork of ancient magic, a physical embodiment of the idea that death can be hidden from, but only if you accept that death is not the enemy. The distinction between Hallows and Horcruxes, then, is the central philosophical divide in the final book of the series. Voldemort seeks immortality through soul mutilation. Dumbledore, in his youth, sought the Hallows to defeat death, to become its master, and that ambition nearly destroyed him. Harry, by contrast, does not seek power. He simply accepts that he must die when the time comes, and by facing death willingly, he becomes the true master of death, in a way that Voldemort never could. But there is one Hallow that carries a particular weight, one that binds together loss and love and grief in a way that the other two do not. That is the Resurrection Stone, the stone that calls back the dead. And yet, as Harry would discover, its power is not what it seems. It does not resurrect, it recalls. And the burden of that recall, the weight of seeing faces you have lost, of hearing voices that can never fully return, that burden is something we will explore in the next chapter, when we talk about the Resurrection Stone's burden. In the tale of the three brothers, the second brother asked for the power to recall the dead, and death handed him a stone that would bring back those he had lost. But as the story warns, the dead cannot truly return. They are shades, echoes, not flesh and blood. And yet, that warning is exactly what makes the Resurrection Stone so dangerously seductive. It offers the illusion of reunion, the comfort of a voice you thought you would never hear again, but it does not bring back the person. It brings back a memory shaped by your own longing, a projection that can never answer your real questions, never hold you back, never truly be present. The psychological danger of the stone is that it tempts you to stay in the past, to live among ghosts rather than among the living. And that is a fate far crueler than death itself. Of all the characters in the series who understood this temptation, Albus Dumbledore understood it better than anyone, and yet he fell victim to it more profoundly than almost anyone else. Dumbledore's fatal mistake in trying to use the stone to see his sister, Ariana, is one of the most heartbreaking moments in the entire wizarding world. After the duel with Grindelwald in 1945, Dumbledore came into possession of the Elder Wand, but the Resurrection Stone, the second Hallow, had been set into a ring that once belonged to Marvolo Gaunt. When Dumbledore discovered the ring, the Horcrux that contained a fragment of Voldemort's soul, he was not simply drawn by the need to destroy a Horcrux. He was drawn by the stone. He knew what it was. He knew its legend. And in a moment of overwhelming grief and longing, he forgot the lesson of the tale of the three brothers. He put on the ring, hoping to see Ariana, hoping to ask for her forgiveness, hoping to somehow undo the tragedy of his youth. But the stone did not bring Ariana back. It only showed him a shade of her, a silent, sorrowful figure that could offer no words of absolution. And worse, the ring carried a deadly curse. The same curse that eventually spread through his hand, leaving him with only a year to live. Dumbledore's mistake was not that he desired to see his sister. It was that he allowed that desire to override the fundamental truth that the dead are gone. The stone cannot restore what is lost. It can only prolong the pain of loss. That is why, at the end of the story, the Resurrection Stone finds its final resting place in the Forbidden Forest. When Harry uses the stone before walking to his own death, he calls forth his parents Sirius and Remus. They walk with him, but they are not truly there. They are comforting echoes, walking beside him through the trees. But Harry knows that when he drops the stone, they will vanish, and he does drop it. He lets it fall among the roots and leaves of the forest, leaving it behind as a symbol of letting go. He chooses to face death without clinging to the past. That act, voluntarily releasing the stone, is the ultimate victory over its temptation. Harry does not become a master of death by possessing the Hallows. He masters death by accepting that the dead cannot return and that the living must move forward. The stone's burden is that it offers a false promise. It can give you a moment of comfort, but it can also trap you in an endless loop of grief. Dumbledore nearly destroyed himself with that loop. Harry broke free, and by leaving the stone in the forest, he ensured that no one else would be tricked by it again. But there is another Hallow, whose burden is even more violent, whose history is stained with blood and betrayal. The Elder Wand has passed from hand to hand through centuries of murder and conquest, and its trail leads through some of the darkest moments in wizarding history. That is a story that demands its own telling, so we will turn to it now. The Resurrection Stone, as we saw, promised a reunion but demanded a price. Dumbledore reached for it in desperation, hoping to see his sister Ariana again, and that fatal choice sealed his doom. But there is another deathly Hallow, perhaps the most infamous of the three, whose story is written not in grief but in blood. The Elder Wand has a trail that stretches back centuries, and every step of that path is marked by violence. It is the most powerful wand ever created, yet its power comes with a terrible condition. The wand must be won. It does not pass gently from hand to hand through inheritance or gift. It demands conquest, and that requirement, that the wand must be taken by force or by cunning, has turned its history into a long, bloody chronicle of murder. The tale of the three brothers tells us that the Elder Wand was created by Death himself, but the reality is more complex. Ancient wizard legends speak of a wand made from elder wood, a branch from a tree that had never been touched by sunlight, and a core of thestral tail hair. The thestral hair, invisible to those who have not witnessed death, is a fitting heart for a wand that craves mastery through dominance. From its earliest known wielders, the wand changed hands only when its previous owner was killed or defeated in a duel. The most notorious of these handovers involved the wizard Loxias, who murdered his own master to claim the wand, and then was himself slain by a rival. And so the pattern was set. Every time the Elder Wand surfaced in history, it left a corpse behind. The wand's trail leads us to the late 19th century, to a young wizard named Gellert Grindelwald. He discovered the Elder Wand after years of obsessive research into the Deathly Hallows. He stole it from the wand maker Gregorovitch, who had been trying to study and replicate its power. Gregorovitch was not its master. He merely possessed it, but Grindelwald subdued him, and the wand recognized its new owner. From that moment, Grindelwald embarked on a campaign of terror across Europe, using the wand's unmatched power to subjugate magical communities, overthrow governments, and impose his vision of wizard supremacy. But the wand's allegiance is fickle, it craves power, and it will abandon a master who no longer proves worthy. In 1945, a duel of legendary proportions took place between Grindelwald and Albus Dumbledore. Dumbledore had once been Grindelwald's closest friend, and perhaps something more. But those bonds had long since been severed by ideology and tragedy. The duel raged across the rooftops of Nurmengard, Grindelwald's fortress prison, and in the end, Dumbledore disarmed Grindelwald, claiming the Elder Wand for himself. The wand transferred its loyalty to Dumbledore at that moment, because it had been won in a true contest of power. Grindelwald was defeated, but he was not killed. The wand did not require murder, only that the previous master be overcome. That distinction is crucial, because it reveals a subtle truth about the wand's nature. It does not demand blood for its own sake. It demands victory. But the way most wizards pursue victory leads to death, because they seek to eliminate their opponent permanently. Dumbledore chose to imprison Grindelwald instead. Yet the wand still recognized him as the victor. For decades, the Elder Wand lay in Dumbledore's possession, buried in his tomb after his death. But here is where the story turned strange. Dumbledore's death was not the result of a duel. He was killed by Severus Snape, acting on Dumbledore's own orders in a planned mercy killing. Because the wand was not won from Dumbledore, its allegiance remained with its previous master. And here is the critical twist. The wand did not pass to Snape. It passed to the person who had disarmed Dumbledore earlier that same year, in a private confrontation. That person was Draco Malfoy. Yes, Draco Malfoy. In the astronomy tower, months before Dumbledore fell, Draco had disarmed the headmaster using the Expelliarmus charm. It was a desperate act by a frightened boy, not a duel for the ages. But the wand does not care about intent. It cares about the act of winning. When Draco Malfoy literally took Dumbledore's wand from his hand, the Elder Wand recognized that as a defeat. Its loyalty shifted to Draco, even though Draco had no idea what he had done. He did not know the wand he had taken was the Elder Wand. He simply pocketed Dumbledore's regular wand, but the bond was formed. Later, when Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy faced each other at Malfoy Manor, Harry physically wrested Draco's own wand away from him. That act of disarming, that simple everyday spell, transferred the Elder Wand's allegiance yet again, this time to Harry. Harry did not defeat Draco in a magical duel, he simply grabbed his wand. But the Elder Wand had learned its lesson from centuries of bloodshed. It now recognized that a wand can be won without killing, and so, when Voldemort later stole the Elder Wand from Dumbledore's tomb, believing he had become its master, he was wrong. The wand would not serve him. At the final battle in Hogwarts, Voldemort cast the killing curse at Harry Potter, but the Elder Wand refused to kill its true master. The curse rebounded, and Voldemort was destroyed by his own spell. The wand that had left a trail of murder through history chose in its final act to spare a life. It was a shocking break from its own bloody legacy. Harry, now the master of the Elder Wand, decided never to use it again. He broke it, casting it off a bridge into a deep ravine, hoping to end its curse forever. But the wand's story did not end there, because the path of the Hallows never truly closes. That refusal to kill Harry, because Harry was the wand's true master, is the final irony of the Elder Wand. For centuries, wizards had killed and died to possess it, believing that only through murder could they secure its loyalty. But the wand had been won, time and again, through acts of disarmament that did not end in death. The bloodshed was never necessary. It was the ambition and cruelty of its wielders that turned the wand into a weapon of slaughter. The wand itself is immoral. It simply obeys the law of conquest. And the deepest lesson of that law is that conquest does not require murder. But wizards who sought the wand could not see that truth. because they were blinded by their own hunger for power. Now we turn from the Hallows to a different kind of dark artifact, one that does not seek to master death, but to cheat it by mutilating the soul. The next chapter will explore the horrifying science of Horcruxes and the lengths to which one wizard went to break the most fundamental rule of magic. The Elder Wand's trail of blood and betrayal follows one simple rule: to win, you must defeat. But what happens when a wizard decides that defeat is no longer possible? What if you could anchor your very soul to the world, so that no wand, no spell, no rival could ever truly destroy you? That is the dark science of Horcruxes, and it begins with a choice that cuts deeper than any curse. The process of soul-splitting through the act of murder is not a spell you can learn from a textbook. It is a ritual born from the deepest well of dark magic, and it requires a violence that tears the soul apart. When a wizard commits murder, the soul, which Rowling describes as the most resilient and yet most fragile part of a human being, becomes fractured. Most murderers never realize it. They carry that scar invisibly, their soul left bruised but whole. But if you know the incantation, if you possess the will to seize that broken piece before it fades, you can trap it. You can encase it inside an object. That object becomes a Horcrux, an anchor that keeps you tethered to life even after your body is destroyed. The first Horcrux Voldemort ever made was his diary, created when he was still a teenager named Tom Riddle, using the death of Myrtle Warren, and that act set him on a path from which there was no return. Why did Voldemort choose significant historical artifacts to house his soul fragments? The answer is layered with ego and symbolism. He did not pick random objects. He sought out treasures that carried centuries of power and prestige. Salazar Slytherin's locket, Helga Hufflepuff's cup, Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem. Each one was a trophy of his own superiority, a way to claim that his legacy would outshine even the founders of Hogwarts. He also used objects that were deeply personal to him, like the ring of the Peverell family, which linked him to the deathly Hallows, and even a living creature, his snake Nagini. But the choice of artifact was not merely about vanity, it was also about protection. He believed that by hiding his soul in objects of immense historical value, he would make them untouchable. Who would dare destroy a relic of the Hogwarts founders? The irony, of course, is that his arrogance became his undoing. His obsession with grandeur made his Horcruxes vulnerable to discovery by a group of young wizards who understood sentiment better than he ever did. The physical and mental toll that creating multiple Horcruxes took on Voldemort's appearance is one of the most haunting consequences of this dark magic. Each time he split his soul, he lost a piece of his humanity. By the time he had made 7 Horcruxes, his face had become something no longer human. The snake-like slits for nostrils, the red eyes, the pale, waxen skin. He was not born looking that way. The Tom Riddle who charmed professors and classmates was handsome, with dark hair and a tall aristocratic bearing. But as he carved away fragments of his soul, his body became a reflection of his inner rot. The process of soul splitting demands such a profound rupture that it literally reshapes the flesh. It is the ultimate proof that the path to immortality through Horcruxes is a slow suicide of the self. And yet, even with all these precautions, Voldemort made a mistake that would destroy him. He did not realize that one of his Horcruxes was not an object or a snake at all. It was a boy who had been marked by the rebounding curse on that night in Godric's Hollow. That Horcrux was created entirely by accident, born of a failed killing and a stray piece of soul that found a home in the only living thing left in the room. The implications of that accident are staggering, and they reach far deeper than anyone could have anticipated. For Harry Potter was never just the boy who lived. He was the anchor Voldemort never knew he had left behind, and that secret would bind them together until the very end. We've seen how Voldemort deliberately split his soul into 7 pieces, choosing relics of historical and personal significance. But the most important Horcrux of all was never part of the plan. It wasn't crafted in a dark ritual, nor sealed inside an ancient artifact. It was made in a split second of catastrophic failure, in a cramped nursery in Godric's Hollow, on a night that changed everything, when the killing curse rebounded from the infant Harry Potter and struck Lord Voldemort. The Dark Lord's body was destroyed, but his soul, already frayed and unstable from years of murder and multiple splittings, did not simply vanish. A fragment of it tore loose, and seeking the nearest living vessel, embedded itself inside the only soul it could find. The tiny, unprotected soul of the boy who had just survived. Harry Potter became a Horcrux, though no one knew it. Not Dumbledore, not Voldemort himself, and certainly not Harry. And that fragment would remain hidden inside him for 16 years, influencing his thoughts, his dreams, and his very identity in ways that would take the entire war to unravel. One of the most immediate and mysterious effects of that soul fragment was the gift of Parseltongue. Harry's first known conversation with a snake happened in the reptile house at the zoo on his cousin Dudley's birthday, years before he ever set foot in the wizarding world. He didn't understand why the glass vanished, or why the boa constrictor thanked him. He only knew he could speak to snakes, and that the ability seemed to terrify everyone who later discovered it. At Hogwarts, Parseltongue was known as a dark and rare talent, one almost exclusively associated with Salazar Slytherin and his descendants, including Lord Voldemort. Many students and teachers assumed Harry was lying about his connection to the Dark Lord, or worse, that he might be a natural heir to Slytherin's legacy. But the truth was far stranger and more tragic. Harry could speak to snakes not because he inherited the ability, but because a piece of Voldemort's soul lived inside him. That fragment carried with it the residual magical traits of its owner, and Parseltongue was one of the most prominent. It was not a learned skill for Harry. It was an involuntary echo of Voldemort's own nature. When he hissed commands at the snake in the Chamber of Secrets, or later spoke to Nagini in Godric's Hollow, he was not channeling his own power. He was channeling a ghost of the Dark Lord that had taken up residence in his scar. This accidental inheritance is one of the most haunting details in the entire series, because it meant that Harry's greatest moment of connection with Voldemort, the night his parents were murdered, also left him permanently marked, not just by a scar but by a fragment of the very murderer he was destined to destroy. That fragment also created a direct mental link between Harry and Voldemort, allowing Harry to glimpse the Dark Lord's thoughts, emotions, and even his location. It was through this connection that Harry learned of Voldemort's movements, his fears, and his eventual discovery of the Horcrux hunt. But the link cut both ways. Voldemort could also sense Harry's presence, and at times he used the bond to feed Harry false visions, leading him into traps. The most devastating of these was the vision of Sirius Black being tortured in the Department of Mysteries, a lie that lured Harry into the Ministry and cost him his godfather's life. For years, Harry believed these visions were a mysterious side effect of the curse, and Dumbledore kept the full truth hidden until the very end, perhaps because he feared what Harry might do if he knew a piece of Voldemort lived inside him. The revelation came in a moment of terrible clarity. Deep beneath Hogwarts on the shores of a subterranean lake, Harry had just retrieved the locket Horcrux from the Basin of Potion. As he and Dumbledore stood gasping in the darkness, the dying headmaster asked Harry to fetch his pensieve. In the memories that followed, Harry watched a younger Dumbledore reason through the pattern of Voldemort's Horcruxes and realised, with dawning horror, that the seventh piece was not an object, it was Harry himself. The Dark Lord had never intended to create a seventh Horcrux that night. He meant to kill the child and make a sixth from the death. But the curse rebounded, and without his knowledge or consent, a shard of his soul lodged itself inside the only living thing left in that room. Harry was the Horcrux Voldemort never intended to make, and that meant Harry would have to die. Everything that followed in the final battle was shaped by that single, unintended magic. Harry's death in the Forbidden Forest was not a sacrifice of defeat. It was the necessary destruction of Voldemort's last anchor to life. When Harry walked into the clearing and allowed the killing curse to strike him, he was not giving up. He was completing the work Dumbledore had set in motion, destroying the fragment of soul that had kept Voldemort tethered to mortality. The curse struck Harry, and the soul fragment inside him was obliterated, even as Harry himself survived, protected by the deep bond of sacrificial love that had marked him since infancy. He fell to the ground and entered a liminal space, a white misty King's Cross, where he met the shade of Dumbledore and understood at last the full scope of what had been done. When he returned to the world of the living, something had changed. The connection was gone. The scar no longer burned, and when later he stood before the Great Hall and faced the final duel, he did not need Parseltongue to command the basilisk fang or speak to Nagini. The language of snakes had left him, because the serpent's voice had belonged to Voldemort all along. Harry would never hiss again, and in that quiet silence, the final traces of the accidental Horcrux dissolved into memory. But that bond, that unintended sharing of a soul, left a permanent mark on how we understand the relationship between Harry and the Dark Lord. It was never just a prophecy or a scar. It was a piece of the murderer living inside the victim, speaking through him until the very end. That strange, ancient ability to speak Parseltongue is a window into something deeper. How the wizarding world classifies magic as good or evil, and how a skill tied to Salazar Slytherin's bloodline became something Harry could wield without ever belonging to that lineage. The truth of why snakes understand him, and what he lost when the fragment was destroyed, is the story of the next chapter. So as we learned in the last chapter, Harry Potter became a Parselmouth, not because he was the chosen one, but because a fragment of Voldemort's soul had latched onto him that night in Godric's Hollow. That connection gave Harry the ability to speak to snakes, a gift he never asked for, and one he never fully trusted. But the language of serpents is far older than Tom Riddle's diary, and it carries a weight that stretches back into the earliest days of Hogwarts. Parseltongue is one of the rarest magical abilities in the wizarding world. It is not taught, nor can it be learned in any ordinary sense. It is inherited, passed down through bloodlines, and even then it appears only in certain families. The most famous line of Parselmouths, of course, is the lineage of Salazar Slytherin himself. Slytherin could speak to snakes, and he valued that ability as a mark of true magical heritage. He embedded it into his very legacy, so that only a true heir of Slytherin could open the Chamber of Secrets. But that legacy came with a dark shadow. Over the centuries, Parseltongue became associated with dark magic, not because the language itself is evil, but because nearly every known Parselmouth in recorded history either practiced the dark arts or was descended from those who did. The ability became a marker of suspicion, a sign that a witch or wizard might be linked to Slytherin's darker ambitions. The Chamber of Secrets was sealed for nearly 1,000 years, and its entrance could only be unlocked by Parseltongue. When Tom Riddle, the heir of Slytherin, opened it as a student, he used his natural gift for Parseltongue to command the basilisk. That same power allowed Harry to open the chamber in his second year, speaking the hissing command to the chamber's entrance, without even realizing what he was doing. It was not a skill Harry cultivated. It was a reflex, a piece of Voldemort's soul acting through him, and that is the crucial distinction. Harry's Parseltongue was parasitic, not inherent. It came from the Horcrux inside him. After the Battle of Hogwarts, when Voldemort's soul fragment was destroyed along with the rest of his Horcruxes, Harry lost the ability to speak to snakes. He could no longer understand them, could no longer hiss commands. This is not something that is widely discussed in the wizarding world, but it is a lore detail that reframes everything we thought we knew about Harry's connection to Voldemort. The Parseltongue was not a prophecy fulfilled. It was an accidental contamination. Once the contamination was removed, the gift vanished. It was never truly Harry's. The rarity of Parseltongue makes this all the more significant. There are only a handful of known Parselmouths in wizarding history. Salazar Slytherin, his descendants like Tom Riddle, and then Harry Potter during the years he carried the Horcrux. But there are others hinted at in obscure records and family trees that never made it into the standard histories. The Gaunt family, for instance, was notoriously proud of their Parseltongue heritage. Though by the time Voldemort's mother Merope was alive, the gift had weakened in that bloodline. Voldemort himself was the most powerful Parselmouth in centuries, and he used that ability to command Nagini, his snake companion. But Nagini was no ordinary serpent, and that is where our next chapter begins. The story of Nagini is one of the most tragic in the entire wizarding world. She was not always a snake, and her transformation into Voldemort's Horcrux is rooted in a curse that predates his rise. In the next chapter, we will explore how Nagini's fate was sealed, long before she ever met the Dark Lord, and what her true origins reveal about the nature of the Maledictus curse. But for now, let the sound of Parseltongue fade into silence, knowing that the language of snakes has finally been put to rest. When Harry lost the ability to speak Parseltongue after the Battle of Hogwarts, it was more than a quiet end to a strange gift. It marked the final separation of his soul from the fragment of Voldemort that had lived inside him. But the language of snakes did not vanish from the wizarding world entirely. There was one being who could still hiss and coil her tongue in that ancient dialect long after Harry's connection was severed. Her name was Nagini, and for years we saw her only as a monster, a giant serpent, a weapon, the final container of Voldemort's soul. But the deeper lore reveals a truth far more heartbreaking. Nagini was not always a snake. She was a woman, a human being born with a rare and terrible condition known as a maledictus blood curse. In the wizarding world, a maledictus is someone who carries a magical affliction passed down through their family line, a curse that eventually transforms them permanently into a beast. Unlike an animagus, who can shift between forms at will, the maledictus has no control over the change. Over time, the transformation becomes irreversible, and Nagini's fate was sealed long before she ever met Voldemort. We first see her human form in the Fantastic Beasts films, where she is a gentle, haunted performer in a circus, trapped in a cycle of fear and hope. She has not yet fully become the snake. She still speaks, still dreams, still remembers who she was. The curse is progressive, eating away at her humanity with each passing year. And this is where the tragedy deepens. She is not a monster by choice. She is a victim of blood magic, of an inheritance she never asked for. Her eventual fate, to serve as the final Horcrux for the Dark Lord, is not a sign of her evil, but of her vulnerability. Voldemort, always seeking immortality, found in Nagini a perfect vessel, a living creature, loyal and lethal, and one whose mind could be bent to his will. He poured a piece of his soul into her, making her one of the most dangerous Horcruxes he ever created. But consider what that meant for the woman trapped inside the snake. Her own soul was already being eroded by the maledictus curse. Now another soul fragment was grafted onto her, further stealing her identity. She was becoming less and less herself with each transformation, until finally the human was gone entirely, and only the serpent remained. This is the cruelest part of Nagini's story. The blood curse did not just change her shape, it stripped her of choice. She was not a willing servant of Voldemort in the way Bellatrix Lestrange was. She was a creature driven by instinct and by the fragment of a psychopath's soul. In the end, when Neville Longbottom killed her with the sword of Gryffindor, he destroyed not only a Horcrux, but the last remnant of a woman who had been cursed before she was ever born. Her transformation represents the loss of identity in its most profound form. A person erased by magic they could not control, and then used as a tool by a tyrant who saw her only as a weapon. When we think of Nagini now, we must see beyond the coiled body and the deadly fangs. She was a maledictus, a human woman whose bloodline condemned her to become a beast. Her connection to Voldemort was not born of loyalty or darkness, but of exploitation. And her fate is one of the saddest in all of the wizarding world. A life that ended not with a choice, but with a curse that left nothing behind but scales and shadows. That theme of despair and the draining of the self leads us naturally toward another creature that feeds on hope and identity, something that glides through the cold prison halls of Azkaban and the darkened corridors of the wizarding imagination, something that does not need a blood curse to steal your soul, only your happiness. The Dementors are waiting, and their anatomy of despair is a study in how magic can hollow out a person from the inside. And now we move from the curse that trapped a human soul inside a serpent to a creature that feeds on the soul itself. The Dementor. If Nagini's story was about the tragedy of transformation, the Dementor's story is about the tragedy of emptiness. These are beings that have no soul of their own, and they exist only to consume the happiness, the warmth, and eventually the soul of anything living that crosses their path. Rowling has said, quite explicitly, that Dementors are a physical manifestation of depression, not just a metaphor for sadness, but the actual embodiment of despair made visible, made touchable, made cold. Think about the way depression works. It drains the colour from the world, saps motivation, makes even the simplest act feel impossible, and whispers that nothing matters. That is exactly what a Dementor does. When one approaches, the air grows frigid, the light dims, and you are flooded with your worst memories. You hear the screams of the dying, you feel the weight of every failure, and you begin to forget that joy ever existed. The Dementor doesn't just make you sad. It convinces you that happiness was always an illusion. This is why the Patronus charm is so difficult. It requires you to summon a memory so pure and so powerful that it can push back against that tide of despair. But for many, that is impossible. The Dementor's presence is so overwhelming that it erases the very thing you need to fight it. That is the vicious cycle of depression. It makes you forget that you ever had a reason to hope. Now, consider the history of these creatures. Long before Voldemort's second rise, Dementors were already a part of the wizarding world's darkest institutions. They served as the guards of Azkaban, the island prison fortress that sits on a bleak rock in the North Sea. For centuries, the Ministry of Magic allowed Dementors to patrol the prison, feeding on the misery of the inmates. It was a horrifying arrangement. The Ministry didn't need to hire human guards, didn't need to build walls or set up security measures, because the Dementors themselves were the perfect deterrent. Escape was impossible, not because of bars and locks, but because the very air around Azkaban was saturated with hopelessness. Even if a prisoner could get past the Dementors, they would be so broken that they'd have no will to flee. But the Ministry paid a terrible price for that convenience. By employing creatures that feed on human suffering, the wizarding government turned its prison into a factory of torment. Prisoners were not rehabilitated, they were hollowed out. Sirius Black spent 12 years in Azkaban, and even though he was innocent, the Dementors didn't care. They fed on his despair anyway. He only survived because he knew the truth, because he knew he was innocent, and that small ember of certainty gave him something the Dementors could not take. That is a rare exception. Most inmates were reduced to shells, their minds erased, their souls slowly consumed, and then Voldemort returned. The Dementors sensed a shift in the air. They are drawn to fear and despair, and Voldemort promised them an endless feast. They abandoned their posts at Azkaban and joined his army. This is one of the most chilling moments in the series. The realization that these soulless beings are not loyal to any government or moral code. They are aligned only with suffering. When Voldemort offered them a world where despair would be universal, they chose him without hesitation. That defection had immediate consequences. Mass breakouts from Azkaban became possible. The most dangerous Death Eaters were freed, and the Ministry lost its primary means of containing them. The Dementors' betrayal was a direct blow to the backbone of wizarding law enforcement, and it showed just how fragile the old order really was. The Ministry had relied on monsters to do its dirty work, and when those monsters found a better master, the whole system collapsed. But the most terrifying aspect of the Dementor is not its presence. It is the Dementor's kiss. This is a fate worse than death, and the books make that clear. A Dementor latches its mouth onto a victim's lips and literally sucks out their soul. The body survives. It breathes, it eats, it can even be moved around, but inside there is nothing. No memory, no identity, no self. The soul has been consumed. In the wizarding world, the soul is the seat of your essence. Without it, you are a ghost in your own skin. The kiss is used as a punishment for the most heinous criminals, but it is a punishment that goes beyond execution. Execution ends life. The kiss ends personhood, and the body left behind is a walking emptiness. This is the ultimate horror of the Dementor. They do not just kill you, they erase you. They remove your soul from the world, and that soul is never coming back. Voldemort, who sought to escape death by any means, would have been horrified by the kiss, because even he knew that a soul could be fragmented. But if it was consumed entirely, there was no resurrection, no second chance. And yet, as dark as these creatures are, they exist in the story to highlight something else. The Patronus charm is not just a spell, it is the direct opposite of the Dementor's nature. It is a shield forged from memory and hope, a piece of light that cannot be extinguished. In the next chapter, we will explore that charm in its full depth, how it works, why it takes the form of an animal, and what it tells us about the power of human memory. There is a reason the Patronus is the only defense against a Dementor, and that reason goes to the heart of what the entire series is about. We ended the last chapter surrounded by the cold. The Dementors, those hooded embodiments of despair, are beings that feed on every happy memory until nothing remains but the worst moments of your life relived endlessly. But the wizarding world, for all its darkness, never leaves its defenders weaponless. The counter to that consuming void is the Patronus charm. A spell so pure it requires no wand movement beyond a single, focused gesture, and no incantation more complicated than the words Expecto Patronum. Yet it is among the most difficult magical feats a witch or wizard can master. The reason? It demands something utterly vulnerable, a single powerful memory of happiness. Unlike other defensive spells that rely on knowledge, reflexes, or raw power, the Patronus is fueled entirely by emotional resonance. It is the only known defense against a Dementor's kiss, the only magic that can drive these soul-sucking wraiths away. The spell does not attack. It creates a shield of positive energy, a living construct made from the caster's own hope. For those who have experienced deep trauma, summoning such a memory is not just hard, it can feel impossible. That is why the Patronus is so rare. It is not taught to ordinary students until their 5th year at Hogwarts, and even then, many never produce more than a wisp of silver mist. But when it works, the result is breathtaking. A corporeal Patronus, an animal form made of pure light, bursts from the wand and charges at the Dementor, scattering it like fog before the sun. The form that Patronus takes is never random. It is a reflection of the caster's innermost self, their personality, their hidden qualities. This is one of the most elegant pieces of magical theory in the entire series. The Patronus is not chosen, it is revealed. For Harry Potter, it is a stag, echoing his father James's animagus form. For Hermione Granger, it is an otter, a creature known for its intelligence and playfulness. For Luna Lovegood, a hare, symbolizing intuition and nervous energy. For Ron Weasley, a Jack Russell Terrier, loyal, brave, and prone to chasing after trouble. The animal does not always match the caster's conscious self-image. It can surprise you, but it is always truthful. This brings us to one of the most heartbreaking Patronus reveals in all of canon. Severus Snape's Patronus is a doe. For years, viewers and readers wondered why a man so bitter, so consumed by darkness, would produce an animal associated with gentleness and grace. The answer lies in the memory he used to fuel the charm. For Snape, there was only one happy memory powerful enough to sustain a Patronus, and it was not about himself. It was about Lily Evans. The doe is her Patronus, and Snape's Patronus remained the same for nearly 2 decades after her death, a testament to the fact that love, even unrequited, even ruined by his own choices, can still generate enough pure emotion to hold back the worst despair. When Dumbledore asks Snape if he still loves Lily after all these years, Snape's only response is to cast that very Patronus wordlessly and let the silver doe roam the office. Dumbledore, for all his wisdom, is visibly moved. The connection between Patronus and identity runs deeper than simple symbolism. In the wizarding world, a Patronus can change. It is possible for the charm to shift after a profound emotional upheaval, such as falling in love, losing a loved one, or undergoing a fundamental change in character. This is rare but documented. The Patronus is, in a sense, a living record of the soul's current state. That is why Snape's unchanging doe matters so much. It proves that his love for Lily never faded, never transformed into something else. It remained frozen at the moment of its creation, perhaps even before she died, before everything went wrong. The charm itself has a long history. The word Patronus is Latin for protector or father, and the spell was developed centuries ago as a defense against Dementors, who are themselves ancient beings. The Ministry of Magic classifies it as a charm, but it operates more like a conjuration, creating a semi-sentient entity from the caster's psyche. There are recorded cases of Patronuses delivering messages, a technique used by members of the Order of the Phoenix during the war. These messenger Patronuses are non-corporeal or corporeal, but they retain the same animal form. It is a deeply personal form of communication. What makes the Patronus especially poignant in the broader lore is its relationship to death and memory. The entire Harry Potter series is built on the tension between those two forces. Voldemort fears death and seeks to escape it. Harry learns to accept it. The Patronus is the magic of hope in the face of annihilation. It requires you to hold on to the best moment of your life, even when everything around you tells you that such joy is impossible. In that sense, it is the perfect counter to the Dementors, who represent the psychological weight of depression. The feeling that nothing good will ever happen again. When Harry learns the charm in his 3rd year, Professor Lupin pushes him relentlessly. Harry struggles because his default mental state is grief and anger, but eventually he finds the memory that works. The moment he realized his parents were watching him from the mirror of Erised, loving him even in death. That memory is not grand. It is quiet and painful, but it is true, and that truth is what makes the Patronus powerful. As we move forward in this exploration of the wizarding world's deepest secrets, we cannot ignore the man whose very name is linked to a star, the Dog Star, brightest in the night sky. That connection between a celestial body and a human soul mirrors the way Patronuses reflect our hidden selves. And that story, the story of Sirius Black and what his name truly means, is waiting just ahead. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. And yet, for all the power of the Patronus charm, there is one wizard whose animagus form was identical to his Patronus, and whose story is written in the stars themselves. His name was Sirius Black, and the naming of the Black family is no accident. It is a constellation of meaning, a celestial map of pride, rebellion and tragedy. The Blacks are one of the oldest wizarding families in Britain, a pure blood dynasty that prided itself on lineage above all else. And in that tradition, they did not choose names lightly. Every member of the family was named after a star or a constellation. Bellatrix, the female warrior star; Andromeda, the chained princess; Regulus, the heart of the lion; Narcissa, a star in the constellation of Pisces; and Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. The Dog Star, part of the constellation Canis Major, the Great Dog. That name was not just a decoration, it was a prophecy. Sirius Black, the son of Orion and Walburga Black, was born into a house that demanded purity and darkness. But from his earliest years, he rejected everything his family stood for. He was sorted into Gryffindor instead of Slytherin. He befriended James Potter, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. He became an animagus, illegally, dangerously, and brilliantly, and his chosen form, a massive black dog. Not just any dog, a grim, the omen of death. But for Sirius, it was something else. It was the physical embodiment of his name. He became the dog star made flesh. Think about that for a moment. The Black family named their children after stars to signify their lofty status, their celestial purity. But Sirius, the brightest star, was also the dog star, and by choosing to become a dog, Sirius took that name and turned it into a declaration of independence. He was not the obedient, noble, pure blood they wanted. He was a wild, loyal, fiercely protective creature, a dog that would follow his friends into any danger, and he did. When he turned into that enormous black hound, he was not just transforming his body, he was becoming the symbol of his own fate. The dog star, in ancient mythology, was associated with the hottest days of summer, with drought, with madness, and with guardianship. The dog at the gate, the faithful watcher. That is what Sirius was. For James and Lily Potter, for Harry, for the Order of the Phoenix. He watched, he waited, he guarded. But the dog star also has a darker face. In the 12 years after he was framed for betraying the Potters and murdering 12 muggles, Sirius was locked in Azkaban, the wizarding prison guarded by Dementors. And here the symbolism deepens. Azkaban is a place where hope is drained, where the happiest memories rot. Most prisoners lose their minds within weeks. But Sirius survived for 12 years, not because he was innocent. The Dementors do not care about guilt or innocence. They feed on emotion, on despair, and Sirius had something that kept him sane. He knew he was innocent. He clung to that knowledge like a lifeline. And more than that, he could transform into a dog. Dogs do not experience human despair in the same way. By becoming his animagus form, he could dull the Dementor's effect on him. The dog star did not go out. It dimmed, but it never vanished. The tragedy of Sirius Black is not just that he was wrongfully imprisoned. It is that the freedom he finally won was hollow. He spent those 12 years in a cell, and then he spent another 2 years on the run, hiding in caves, eating rats, living as a fugitive. He never got to raise his godson. He never got to clear his name properly in the eyes of the world. He died in the Department of Mysteries, laughing as he fell through the veil, still fighting, still loyal, still the dog at the gate. The brightest star in the sky extinguished too soon, but the dog star still shines. Every year, when the constellation Canis Major rises in the winter sky, Sirius is there. And for those who know the story, it is impossible to look at that star without thinking of the man who became a dog, who was named for the brightest light, and who burned so fiercely in the darkness. That light would eventually be needed again, in ways that none of them could have predicted, because the man who betrayed Sirius, the man whose whispered secret sent him to Azkaban, was not just Peter Pettigrew. It was the tangled web of loyalty and lies that surrounded the Potters. A web that had another face, another name, another long game. A game that would take us deep into the mind of Severus Snape. The dog star Sirius burned bright in the night sky, a faithful companion even in death. But for every star that guides, there is a shadow that follows. And in the story of Harry Potter, no shadow is more misunderstood, more bitterly contested than that of Severus Snape. His name alone conjures a storm of reactions. The greasy-haired potions master, the cruel teacher who tormented a boy for the sins of his father. But what if I told you that the core of his character, the engine that drove every choice he ever made, was a love so profound and so impossible that it rewrote the very fabric of the war against Voldemort? That is the long game we must now unravel. To understand Snape, you must first understand the weight of a single memory, a memory that did not belong to him alone, but was shared in the most vulnerable moment possible. The memory of a girl with eyes the colour of a summer sky, Lily Evans. Their friendship began in childhood, a bond woven from the shared discovery of magic, of being outsiders in a mundane world. But the ties of childhood are fragile, and the darker impulses of ambition and association with those who sought power corrupted that bond. Snape, desperate for belonging, found a home among the future Death Eaters of Slytherin. And in that choice, he drove a wedge between himself and Lily that would never fully heal. When he called her a mudblood, in a moment of shame and rage, he sealed a wound that would fester for the rest of his life. But that wound became the axis upon which the entire Wizarding War would turn. When Voldemort chose to hunt the Potter family, Snape had already begged for Lily's life, offering anything, everything, in exchange for her safety. Voldemort, in his arrogance, agreed to spare her, but he did not understand the depth of a mother's protection. He killed her anyway. And in that moment, Snape's world collapsed. He was left with nothing but guilt. A guilt so corrosive that it could have destroyed him. Instead, it became the tool that Dumbledore, the master strategist, would wield like a scalpel. Dumbledore saw in Snape not a broken man, but a weapon perfectly honed by remorse. He used Snape's guilt to ensure Harry's protection, not through love, not through redemption, but through a calculated arrangement. Dumbledore asked Snape to watch over Harry, to guard him from the shadows, and in return, Snape was given a purpose that allowed him to survive his own despair. But Dumbledore also knew that guilt alone is not enough, so he planted a deeper hook, Snape's role as a double agent. By sending Snape back into Voldemort's ranks, Dumbledore forced him to live a lie, to constantly prove his loyalty to the Dark Lord while secretly feeding information to the Order. It was a performance that required absolute control, a performance that slowly eroded any chance Snape had at a normal life. And here is where the moral ambiguity of his character becomes impossible to ignore. Snape, the man who sacrificed everything, was also the man who tormented his students with a cruelty that bordered on sadistic. He bullied Neville Longbottom until his greatest fear was the potions classroom. He dismissed Hermione's brilliance as mere bookishness. He used his position to show favoritism to his own house, and he never, not once, let go of his hatred for Harry's father. How do we reconcile the hero who died for the cause with the man who made a child's life a living nightmare? The answer is uncomfortable. Snape was not a good man. He was a man who did good things, but only because of his obsession with Lily. His sacrifice was not born from a love of good over evil, but from a personal consuming devotion that happened to align with the side of light. He protected Harry because Harry was Lily's son, and in Harry's eyes, Snape saw the only part of her that still lived. But he also saw James Potter, and that bitterness never faded. This is the tragedy of Snape's long game. He played his role so perfectly that even Dumbledore, who orchestrated it all, could not fully predict the depth of his internal war. When the final moment came and Nagini's fangs pierced his throat, Snape gave Harry the memories that would finally reveal the truth that he had been the one whispering the prophecy to Voldemort. Prophecy that set the entire tragedy in motion, and the truth that he had spent the rest of his life trying to undo that mistake. He died looking into the same green eyes he had loved since childhood, and in that moment, the game ended, but the legacy of his choices did not. The question of whether a man can be redeemed by love alone, even when his actions were often cruel, is one that lingers long after the pages close. It forces us to look at the shadow of Sirius, the bright and reckless star, and compare it to the shadow of Snape, the bat who lived in darkness. One was a devoted godfather, the other a protector born of guilt, and both were shaped by forces larger than themselves. The weight of class, of family, of blood is never far in the wizarding world. Next, we turn to the family that stands as the heart of the story, the Weasleys, and examine how their poverty and their pride shaped the dynamics of a war that demanded everything from everyone. Because the cost of love is not always measured in sacrifice. Sometimes it is measured in the quiet dignity of a hand-me-down robe and the fierce loyalty that comes from having nothing to lose. We ended the last chapter with Severus Snape's long game, his decades of silence, his final memory, and the truth that he had loved Lily Potter since they were children. It is a truth that rewrites everything we thought we knew about the man in black, and it is a truth that forces us to ask, in a world that judges people by the blood in their veins, What does loyalty actually cost? That question brings us to another family, one that stands in stark opposition to everything the Malfoys and the Blacks represent, the Weasleys. They are the heart of the story, not because they are the most powerful or the richest, but because they choose to be something else entirely. In the wizarding world, the Weasley name is synonymous with one word: blood traitor. It is meant as an insult, a slur, a mark of shame, but the Weasleys wear it as a badge of honour. They are a pure blood family who have rejected the entire ideology of blood purity. For them, lineage means nothing. Merit, kindness and courage mean everything. And that choice, made over and over again across generations, places them at the centre of a quiet war that has nothing to do with dark magic and everything to do with what the magical world values. Consider what it means to be a Weasley in a society where old money and ancient names open doors. Arthur Weasley works for the Ministry of Magic in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office, a job that is looked down upon, a job that is seen as a joke. He has a deep, almost childish love for Muggle inventions, from rubber ducks to the inner workings of a car. He is relentlessly curious about a world that most pure bloods dismiss as inferior, and that curiosity, that refusal to sneer at Muggles, marks him as eccentric at best and dangerous at worst. His wife Molly runs their household on a shoestring budget, making do with hand-me-down robes and second-hand cauldrons, all while raising 7 children in a house that literally cannot stand upright without magical support. The Burrow is a crooked, charming, chaotic home, bursting with love and laughter and the constant smell of cooking. It is the opposite of the cold, pristine halls of Malfoy Manor, and that contrast is deliberate. The colour red is everywhere in the Weasley story. Their hair is a brilliant, unmistakable red, a visual marker that sets them apart in a crowd. In the films, the Gryffindor common room glows with crimson and gold, and the Weasleys are the family that embodies that house's virtues more than any other. But red is also the colour of warning, of fire, of the blood that they are supposedly traitors to. It is the colour of the sky over the Burrow when the Death Eaters attack in the later books, and it is the colour of the sparks that fly from Fred and George's fireworks, their rebellion against authority, long before the war begins. Because the Weasleys are not just kind, they are poor, and that poverty is not incidental to their story. It is a constant, grinding reality that shapes every decision they make. Ron never has new robes. His wand is a hand-me-down from his brother Charlie, and it is broken and patched with speller tape. He is acutely aware of his family's financial struggles, and it feeds his insecurity, his fear of being overlooked. When Draco Malfoy sneers at him on the Hogwarts Express in the very first book, he does not attack Ron's magical ability. He attacks his poverty. No one wants to sit with that lot, Draco says, pointing at Ron's second-hand robes and his pet rat. It is a cruel reminder that in the wizarding world, wealth is often confused with worth. But Ron's family has something that no amount of galleons can buy. They have each other, and then there are Fred and George. The twins are the wild card in the Weasley deck. They are mischief personified, always scheming, always laughing, always pushing boundaries. Their humour is not just comic relief, it is a form of resistance. In a world that takes itself far too seriously, a world of dark lords and blood purity and life or death stakes, Fred and George refuse to stop joking. They turn the Marauders map into a tool for chaos. They create a joke shop that sells Ton-Tong toffees and puking pastilles, products that subvert the very idea of control. When Umbridge attempts to impose order at Hogwarts, the twins fight back with fireworks and swamp and a spectacular exit that leaves the entire school cheering. Their laughter is a weapon, and it is one of the most powerful weapons in the series. Because laughter in the face of oppression is an act of defiance. It says, "You have not broken us. You will not break us." But that humour is also a shield. Underneath the pranks and the punchlines, Fred and George are deeply loyal. They spend their entire childhood sharing everything: a single brain, a single sense of humour, a single best friend. They are so close that they finish each other's sentences. and that bond is tested in the most brutal way imaginable. One of them will not survive the final battle, and when that loss comes, the silence that follows is louder than any joke they ever told. The Weasley family, in all their poverty and chaos and love, stand as a living contradiction to the ideology of Voldemort. They prove that blood does not determine worth. They prove that a family can be rich in everything that matters, even when their vault is empty. And they prove that in a world obsessed with purity, the purest thing of all is a heart that chooses kindness. That idea of what we truly desire when we look beyond the surface is one that will lead us to an object that reflects not what we see, but what we most deeply want. An object that can show a poor boy a family of red-haired siblings, a lonely girl a life of friendship, or a grieving wizard a loved one who is gone. That object waits in a forgotten room, hidden behind a door that only the needy can open, and what it reveals is never what we expect. From the warmth of the Weasley family's kitchen, with its clutter of enchanted dishes and the quiet hum of a household that valued loyalty over gold, we step into a very different kind of space, a cold, high-ceilinged room on the 3rd floor of Hogwarts, where the only light comes from the faint shimmer of an ancient mirror. This is the Mirror of Erised, and it holds a temptation far more dangerous than any dark curse. The Mirror of Erised is not a simple looking glass. Its name, if you read it backward, spells desire, and the inscription carved around its frame reads, "I show not your face, but your heart's desire." But what the mirror actually shows is not a wish granted or a future fulfilled. It shows the deepest, most desperate longing of the person who stands before it. And that is exactly why it is a trap. When Harry Potter first stumbles upon the mirror, hidden in an abandoned classroom, he sees his parents alive, standing beside him, smiling. It is the family he never had, the parents he never knew. For a boy raised in a cupboard under the stairs, this vision is intoxicating. He returns night after night, sitting in the cold, just watching his mother and father wave at him. He stops caring about classes, about Quidditch, about his friends. He only wants to be in that room with that image. This is the mirror's true danger. It does not lie, but it does not help. It offers a perfect vision of what you most desire, but it gives you no way to reach it. The longer you stare, the more you fall into a dream that can never be real. And if you are not careful, you will waste your life chasing a reflection. Dumbledore finds Harry there one night, and he does not scold him. Instead, he speaks with a quiet sadness that seems to carry centuries of understanding. He tells Harry that the mirror will be moved to a new location, and he warns him not to go looking for it again. But the most telling moment is when Harry, full of curiosity, asks Dumbledore what he sees when he looks in the mirror, and Dumbledore pauses. Then he says he sees himself holding a pair of thick woolen socks. Socks, he says, because one can never have enough socks. It is a charming answer, a whimsical evasion, but anyone who knows the real Dumbledore knows it is a lie. The truth is far darker. What Dumbledore actually saw in the Mirror of Erised was his family reunited. His brother Aberforth, his sister Ariana, and his parents, all alive, all whole, all forgiving him for the terrible mistake that cost Ariana her life. Because Dumbledore's deepest desire is not socks. It is to undo the past, to take back the moment when he was a reckless young man obsessed with power and glory, and instead choose loyalty and love. But he cannot, and the mirror would show him that impossible dream, just as it showed Harry his parents. Yet Dumbledore does not tell Harry the truth. Why? Because he knows that the mirror is a trap, and he does not want Harry to dwell on what cannot be changed. He wants Harry to move forward, and so he offers a trivial desire, a joke, to deflect the boy's attention. But the mirror's role in this story is not merely to tempt the lonely. It is also a key piece in a much larger puzzle. Later that same year, Dumbledore hides the Philosopher's Stone inside the mirror, because he understands something that no one else does. The mirror will not give the stone to someone who wants to use it. It will only give it to someone who wants to find it, without wanting to use it. In other words, the mirror protects the stone from anyone who seeks it for power, for immortality, for selfish gain. Only a person whose heart's desire is simply to keep the stone safe, not to use it, can retrieve it. That is why the enchantment works. When Voldemort, desperate for the elixir of life, stands before the mirror, he sees himself holding the stone, but he cannot take it, because his desire is to use it, and the mirror reflects that desire, but does not fulfill it. When Harry stands before the mirror, he sees only the stone appearing in his pocket, because his heart's desire is not to use it, but to prevent Voldemort from getting it, and so the stone falls into his hand. This paradox reveals something essential about the nature of magic in this world. Many spells and protections are not just about power, but about intention. The mirror does not judge by worthiness in a moral sense. It reads the deepest, most honest need of the soul. And in a world where so many characters are driven by ambition, revenge, or fear, the mirror exposes what they truly lack. Think about what Voldemort would have seen if he had ever looked into the mirror without the stone in mind. Not power, not domination, but perhaps a return to his own lost humanity. Or maybe just the embrace of his mother, who died after giving him a name he later abandoned. But Voldemort would never allow himself to look that deeply. He would see only the object of his greed. And that is the mirror's final lesson. It does not trap you with a lie. It traps you with a truth you cannot bear to walk away from. Harry was lucky that Dumbledore intervened before he became another ghost in that room, frozen in longing, but many others have not been so fortunate. As we move deeper into the lore of Hogwarts, the notion that time itself can be bent, reversed, and relived becomes not just a fantasy, but a carefully regulated branch of magic. And that will lead us into a story of hourglasses, lost hours, and the quiet danger of tampering with what has already been written. The next chapter explores the time turners and the laws of magic that govern them, a subject that reveals just how fragile the boundary is between fixing a mistake and breaking the world. The Mirror of Erised showed us the danger of getting lost in what we desire most. But there is another magical object in this world that plays with time itself, and the rules surrounding it are far more strict than any enchantment on a mirror. Tonight, we step into the strange and fragile science of time travel in the wizarding world, starting with the device that made it possible, the Time Turner. In the third book, we met Hermione Granger, carrying a burden no other student had ever been trusted with. She had been given a Time Turner, a small golden hourglass on a necklace, by Professor McGonagall, so she could attend more classes than the timetable allowed. But this was not a toy. The Ministry of Magic imposed the most rigid regulations on time travel of any branch of magic. Only a handful of time turners existed, all locked in the Department of Mysteries, and even those were issued only under extraordinary circumstances, and with the explicit approval of the Wizengamot. The logic behind these restrictions was simple. Messing with time could unravel reality itself. The version of time travel in the third book follows what is known as a closed-loop theory. When Harry and Hermione use the Time Turner to go back 3 hours, they are not creating an alternate timeline. They are simply fulfilling the timeline that already happened. The Hagrid who had his door knocked on, the Buckbeak who mysteriously escaped execution. All of that was already the result of their future actions. There is no paradox of the grandfather killing his own ancestor, because every change they made had already been accounted for in the original sequence of events. This is the only safe way to travel through time in the wizarding world. You cannot change the past, you only complete it. But the Ministry knew that even this closed loop had its dangers. If a traveller revealed themselves to their past self, or if they acted outside the chain of events that had already occurred, the consequences could be catastrophic. The laws of magic governing the Time Turner were written in the same breath as the laws against dark magic. Only the most learned and trustworthy witches or wizards were ever permitted to use one, and always under the supervision of the Department of Mysteries. The device itself was enchanted to rotate hour by hour, never more than a few hours at a time, precisely because anything longer risked destabilizing the fabric of time. And then, in the 5th book, the entire stock of Ministry Time Turners was destroyed. It happened during the battle at the Department of Mysteries, when Harry and his friends fight Death Eaters in the Hall of Prophecy. The battle raged through the chambers of the department, and in that chaos, a shelf filled with Time Turners was shattered. The crash sent a cascade of broken glass and golden sand across the floor, and every single Time Turner in the Ministry's possession was destroyed, never to be replicated. The loss was immense. The knowledge required to craft them had been lost centuries earlier, and the destruction meant that time travel, as a regulated practice, became impossible. From that moment onward, the wizarding world was forced to move forward in a straight line again, with no way to revisit the past. But the law did not stop there. Later, in the plays and expanded material, we saw the catastrophic consequences of what happens when time is tampered with outside the closed loop. In the story of, we encounter a different kind of time travel, one that breaks the closed loop entirely. When Scorpius Malfoy and Albus Potter use a smaller experimental time turner to save Cedric Diggory, they do not simply complete a loop. They create alternate realities where Voldemort won and the world descended into darkness. This is the nightmare that the Ministry had always feared. By altering even a single moment, the past becomes a fragile branch that can snap into a new and terrible direction. The closed loop had protected everyone from the chaos of multiple timelines, and without it, the very structure of history becomes a blade that cuts both ways. There is a reason, then, that the destruction of the Time Turners is one of the most significant events in the magical world. It closed the door on time travel forever, forcing wizards to face the consequences of their choices without the possibility of a do-over. And it also underlines a deeper truth about the series, that the past cannot be undone, only understood. Harry learns this lesson again and again, from his conversation with Dumbledore at King's Cross to his final walk into the Forbidden Forest. Time is not a resource to be spent. It is a river that flows in one direction, and the best we can do is accept where it leads. But there is another family who understood the weight of fear better than most. A family whose entire identity was built around avoiding the very consequences that time travel could have prevented. Their story is one of cowardice and sacrifice, of a father who chose fear over love, and a son who tried to break that cycle. That is a tale for another night. When we step into the shadow of the Malfoy family and the price they paid for their fear, the destruction of the Ministry's entire stock of time turners during the battle at Department of Mysteries wasn't just a catastrophic blow to magical law enforcement. It was a symbolic shattering of the illusion that time itself could be controlled, bent, or safely manipulated. And in the wreckage of that event, a deeper truth emerged, that some forces cannot be undone or outrun. Fear, for instance, the kind of fear that seeps into a family's bones over generations, reshaping pride into paranoia and privilege into a desperate, clawing need to survive at any cost. That is the story of the Malfoys. When we first meet the Malfoy family, they are the picture of wizarding aristocracy, pure blood lineage stretching back centuries, unimaginable wealth, a sprawling manor hidden from Muggle eyes, and a haughty disdain for anyone they consider beneath them. Lucius Malfoy walks the halls of the Ministry with the confidence of a man who believes the world was made for him and his kind. Draco struts into Hogwarts in his first year, as though the school itself should bow to his name. They are villains, certainly, but they are also something more revealing. They are a case study in what fear does to a family, when that fear is the only inheritance that truly matters. But the Malfoys' arrogance was always a mask. Beneath the polished exterior and the sneering remarks lay a terror so profound it consumed everything they claimed to value. Lucius Malfoy had spent years currying favour with powerful dark wizards, not because he believed in their cause with his whole heart, but because he feared being on the losing side. He had seen what happened to families who defied the rising tide of blood purity extremism. He had watched the old nobility crumble, one estate at a time, when they refused to bow, and so he bowed. He knelt before Voldemort not out of ideological devotion, but out of a cowardice dressed up as pragmatism. The Malfoys were never true believers in the way Bellatrix Lestrange was. They were opportunists who miscalculated the cost of their allegiance, and when Voldemort returned, that cost came due. The sprawling manor became a prison. The drawing rooms where Lucius once hosted ministry officials were turned into war rooms for Death Eaters, who treated him with barely concealed contempt. Draco, a boy raised to believe his name would open every door, was handed a task designed to destroy him. He was sent to kill Albus Dumbledore, not because Voldemort trusted the Malfoys, but because he wanted to punish them for Lucius's failure. The Dark Lord understood the cruelest weapon he had was not the killing curse, it was fear, and he poured that fear into Draco Malfoy until the boy could barely breathe. This is where the transition truly begins. The Malfoys stop being villains in the traditional sense and start becoming something else. Victims, not innocent victims. They made their choices, they supported the regime, they profited from terror, but victims nonetheless. Victims of the very monster they helped create. Lucius is reduced to a hollow shell, stripped of his wand, his status, his dignity. Narcissa watches her son unravel, and she knows that the world she built for him is collapsing, and Draco, trapped in a mission he never wanted, begins to understand that the power he once idolized is nothing but a chain. J.K. Rowling has said that Draco Malfoy is not a hero, but he is not irredeemable either, and that redemption comes at a terrible price. The willingness to stand against everything your family taught you, even if only for a single moment. In the final book, Draco is given a chance to identify Harry Potter in the drawing room of Malfoy Manor. He hesitates. He lies. He says he is not sure it is Harry. That moment of hesitation is the first crack in the armor of his fear. It is not a grand act of bravery. It is a quiet, terrified refusal to participate any further in the machinery of cruelty, and it changes everything. But the most pivotal moment of the entire war belongs not to Draco, not to Lucius, but to Narcissa Malfoy. In the Forbidden Forest, after Voldemort casts the killing curse at Harry, he commands Narcissa to check if the boy is dead. She kneels beside Harry, feels the pulse of his heart, a heart still beating because of the ancient magic Lily Potter's sacrifice created, and she makes a choice. She asks Harry in a whisper if Draco is alive. Harry tells her he is, and Narcissa Malfoy, a woman who spent her entire life preserving appearances and protecting her family at any cost, looks up at the Dark Lord and says a single word: dead. That lie is the hinge on which the entire final battle turns. Without it, Voldemort would have continued to believe Harry was dead, and the war might have ended very differently. But Narcissa's love for her son outweighed her fear of Voldemort. It outweighed her ideology, her pride, her place in the hierarchy of terror. In that moment, the Malfoy family's long arc from arrogance to terror reached its final stage. They became people willing to sacrifice everything for the one thing that mattered more than survival: love for their child. It is not a clean redemption. They do not become heroes, but they become human. And in the wizarding world, that is a kind of miracle. Draco's own redemption is quieter, more painful, and never fully complete. After the war, he marries, has a son, and names him Scorpius, a name that reflects a desire to build something new, something not poisoned by the past. He does not embrace the old pure blood supremacy. He does not teach his son to hate. He carries the weight of his family's expectations and failures, and he tries, in his own guarded way, to be better. It is a redemption arc, not of glory, but of endurance. The burden of the Malfoy name is not something you shed overnight. It is a shadow that follows you into every room, every conversation, every quiet moment of reflection. And yet, the Malfoy's story is not unique to Britain. Fear, after all, is a universal currency. The politics of blood purity, the terror of falling from grace, the desperate bargains families make to protect their own. These are not confined to one island or one ministry. The wizarding world is vast, and its history is woven with similar threads of power, betrayal, and survival across every continent. The next time we meet, we will step beyond the borders of Hogwarts and the British Ministry, and explore how the magical communities of other nations faced their own darkness. The global wizarding world holds secrets that even the most learned wizards in Britain never fully understood. The lie Narcissa Malfoy told Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest was a private act of maternal desperation, but it rippled outward into a war that involved wizards from across the globe. That single moment, when she chose her son over her master, was only possible because the wizarding world had, centuries earlier, decided to hide itself from non-magical eyes. The International Statute of Secrecy, signed in 1689 and fully enacted by 1692, was the treaty that redefined magical life everywhere. Before that, witches and wizards lived openly alongside muggles, often serving as healers, advisors, or feared figures. But the witch hunts of the early modern period, which were not nearly as successful as persecutors believed, since most witches could escape with a simple flame-freezing charm, convinced magical governments that secrecy was survival. The statute created a hidden global civilization with its own laws, its own economy, and its own schools. And those schools were not all like Hogwarts. Hogwarts is the British institution, founded around the 10th century by Godric Gryffindor, Salazar Slytherin, Helga Hufflepuff, and Rowena Ravenclaw. But across the Channel, in the mountainous region of southern France, stands Bogues-Batten's Academy of Magic, a palace of graceful architecture and formal manners, where students speak French and learn magic with an elegance that British wizards sometimes find pretentious. Bogues-Batten's is known for its refined approach to transfiguration and its beautiful grounds, complete with a fountain of purest water that has healing properties. Its students wear pale blue silk robes, and the school is presided over by Madame Olympe Maxime, a half-giantess who carries herself with immense dignity. The Triwizard Tournament, which Harry experienced in his 4th year, was a rare moment of contact between these three great European schools: Hogwarts, Bogues-Batten's, and Durmstrang. Durmstrang Institute, by contrast, is hidden somewhere in the far north, possibly in Scandinavia or the northern reaches of Eastern Europe. Its reputation is darker. Durmstrang places a greater emphasis on the dark arts than Hogwarts ever would, and its students are known for their toughness and their loyalty to tradition. The school does not admit Muggle-borns, a policy that reflects the pure blood ideology that has festered in certain magical communities for generations. Victor Krum, the famous Bulgarian Quidditch player, was a Durmstrang student, and his presence in the Triwizard Tournament showed how different the school's culture was. The students marched in with furs and thick cloaks, and they bowed stiffly to their hosts. Durmstrang's headmaster, Igor Karkaroff, was a former Death Eater, a man who had traded secrets to save his own skin. That school, like the Malfoys, was caught between the old aristocratic traditions and the rising terror of Voldemort. But Europe is only a small part of the global wizarding world. Further south in Africa lies Ouagadougou, the oldest and largest magical school on the continent, hidden in the mountains of the Moon in Uganda. Ouagadougou is remarkable for many reasons, not least because its students learn magic without wands. Wandless magic is the norm there, practiced by the school's thousands of students who use gestures and focused intention to cast spells. African witches and wizards have long understood that the wand is merely a conduit, a focusing tool. The power comes from the wizard itself. This is a deep contrast with European traditions, which treat the wand as almost sacred. The students at Ouagadougou learn astronomy, alchemy, and self-transfiguration, and they communicate with their parents by sending messages through flame. The school also has a unique method of selecting students. Rather than an owl-delivered letter, a dream messenger appears to the child on the night before their 11th birthday. leaving a token that marks them as chosen. Imagine waking up with a carved stone or a piece of parchment that you know came from a dream. That is how magic announces itself in Uganda. Wandless magic is not limited to Africa. In Asia, there are other traditions. The Mahutakoro School of Magic in Japan, for example, sits on the volcanic island of Iwo Jima, and its students wear enchanted robes that change colour as they gain knowledge. The school teaches a rigorous form of magic that includes martial arts and flight training on miniature broomsticks from an early age. In South America, the Castelo Bruxo School in the Amazon rainforest is hidden from muggles by the dense jungle and by the Kaipora, magical guardians that look like small, furry creatures. Castelo Bruxo teaches herbology and magical zoology with an expertise that rivals Hogwarts, and its students learn to work with the spirits of the forest. All these schools, all these different cultures, coexist under the same global treaty, the International Statute of Secrecy. It is the invisible wall that separates the magical world from the Muggle one. The statute is enforced by the International Confederation of Wizards, a governing body that meets every few years to discuss policy, regulate magical creatures, and deal with breaches of secrecy. The British Ministry of Magic is just one national branch of this system. The statute is why wizards cannot fly openly over London, why the Quidditch World Cup had to be hidden under a vast magical tent, and why the wizarding world remains a secret society that spans the earth. But the statute is not just about hiding, it is about identity. It creates a sense of belonging, a shared secret that binds all witches and wizards together, even when they are from rival schools or hostile nations. When Voldemort rose to power, he did not threaten the statute directly. He threatened the internal harmony of the magical world itself. The Death Eaters wanted to tear down the statute and reveal magic to Muggles, but only in order to dominate them. The war that Harry fought was not just against one Dark Lord. It was a war over the future of this hidden civilization. Would it remain a place of diversity and freedom, or would it become a tyranny of pure blood supremacy? That war was about to reach its final stage. Hogwarts, the school that had been Harry's home for 6 years, would become the battlefield, and the global wizarding world, for all its differences, would be forced to choose a side. The cost of that choice would be measured in lives, in destroyed families, and in the quiet loss of trust that had held the magical community together for centuries. The Malfoys had already made their choice. Narcissa had chosen love over loyalty to Voldemort. Now, in the shadows of the castle that had seen 1,000 years of magical history, the entire world was about to be tested. We have travelled across continents, from the ancient halls of Ilvermorny to the sunlit corridors of Uwagadu, where magic flows without a wand, shaped by intention alone. But all these distant schools, all these different traditions, ultimately converge on a single point in history. When the war finally came to its breaking point, it did not erupt in a foreign land or a hidden ministry. It came home to the one place that had always been a sanctuary, a classroom, a proving ground. It came to Hogwarts. The castle was never just a school. It was a fortress built by the founders, layered with centuries of protective enchantments, secret passages, and loyal ghosts. And in the final months of the war, it became the last meaningful stronghold against the Death Eaters. Voldemort understood this as clearly as anyone. If he could control Hogwarts, he controlled the future of magical Britain. The school represented not just education, but the very soul of wizardkind. To seize it was to break the resistance. To defend it was to make a stand that would echo through every generation. So, when the Order of the Phoenix gathered, and the students returned from hiding, and the professors took up arms beside them, they knew exactly what they were fighting for. The castle itself became a character in that battle. Its walls trembled with defensive spells. Its staircases shifted to confuse invaders. The statues of armor and stone guardians awakened, marching alongside the living. Even the landscape rose to help. The Whomping Willow lashed out. The Forbidden Forest seemed to hold its breath. Every inch of Hogwarts was a weapon, and every corridor a memory worth dying for, and many did die. That is the cost of war, and the series never flinched from showing it. Remus Lupin, who had known loneliness his entire life, who had finally found a family in Tonks and their newborn son, fell in the final fight. Tonks fell beside him. Their deaths were not heroic in the cinematic sense. There was no dramatic last word, no lingering close-up. They simply were there one moment, and then they were gone. The reality of conflict is that it does not offer clean endings. It steals people in the middle of their sentences. Fred Weasley, the twin who had never known a moment without his other half, died laughing. Or at least, he died while laughter was still on his lips. George would later say he could never produce a proper Patronus again, because all his happiest memories were split in two. The Weasley family, which had anchored the story in warmth and love, was shattered in an instant, and yet they kept fighting. That is what war demands. It demands that you keep standing, even when your heart has been torn out. The cost was measured in names that would never be called again. Colin Creevey, the boy who idolized Harry with a camera, was found with his small body still clutching his wand, having snuck back into the fight despite being underage. Lavender Brown, who had once giggled over horoscopes, was taken by Fenrir Greyback. The battle was a slaughter of the young, the brave, and the ordinary. It was not a storybook victory. It was a price paid in flesh and memory. But Hogwarts itself did not fall. When the dust settled, when Voldemort's body lay in the Great Hall, the castle still stood. Its towers were scarred, its halls filled with rubble and grief, but it remained. And in the months and years that followed, the school was rebuilt. Stone by stone, spell by spell, the windows were repaired, the broken staircases were restored, and students returned. That rebuilding was not just physical, it was symbolic. It said that the wizarding world would not let fear dictate its future, that children would still learn transfiguration under the enchanted ceiling, that laughter would echo through the corridors again. The new era began quietly, not with fireworks, but with the simple act of reopening the gates. There would be a new headmaster, a new generation of students, and a new understanding of what it meant to be a Gryffindor or a Slytherin. The Battle of Hogwarts had changed everything, and yet, in a strange way, it had also preserved the thing that mattered most. The school endured. When we finally see those familiar red brick walls again, 19 years later, it is not as a monument to loss. It is as a living, breathing place, where children are sorted into houses, where friendships are formed, where the next chapter of the wizarding world begins. And that is perhaps the deepest magic of all. The Battle of Hogwarts was over, but the war's true cost lingered in every stone of the castle, in every flagstone slick with rain and memory. The bodies had been carried away, the dead honoured in a dawn that felt more like a held breath than a sunrise. The Great Hall, still scarred from the final confrontation, had become a place of mourning and then, slowly, of rebuilding. The wizarding world had been shattered, its foundations cracked by decades of fear, prejudice, and the shadow of one man who had sought to conquer death itself. In the months that followed, the Ministry of Magic underwent a transformation that was as quiet as it was profound. Kingsley Shacklebolt, once an Auror and a member of the Order of the Phoenix, was appointed interim minister, and his first acts were not about power but about repair. He dissolved the old departments that had enforced blood purity laws, closed the offices that had turned a blind eye to the disappearances, and opened investigations into those who had collaborated with the Death Eaters. The wizarding world had to face its own complicity, the way it had allowed fear to poison its institutions. It was not a clean process. There were trials, accusations, and the slow, painful work of truth. But for the first time in generations, the ministry began to represent all witches and wizards, not just the old families with pure bloodlines. The Golden Trio, as the newspaper still called them, had emerged from the war with a bond forged in fire and loss. Harry Potter, the boy who had lived, now a young man who had survived more than anyone should have to, did not retreat into legend. He became an Auror, but not the kind of Auror the Ministry had once employed. He worked alongside Kingsley to overhaul the department, rooting out corruption, training new recruits to value justice over ideology. Harry understood that power, when unchecked, could become a prison. He had spent years inside one kind of cage or another, and he knew that true freedom required vigilance, not vengeance. Hermione Granger, who had always been the one to see the bigger picture, returned to the Ministry with a purpose. She had already spent her school years fighting for house elves and questioning the status quo. Now she had the authority to make real change. She rose through the ranks, first in the department for the regulation and control of magical creatures, then into the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. She drafted legislation that outlawed discrimination based on blood status, established protections for magical beings, and reformed the educational system so that Hogwarts would never again be a place where one house was favoured over another. Her mind was a blueprint for a better world, and she poured every ounce of her extraordinary intellect into building it. Ron Weasley, often underestimated, found his own path. He helped George run Weasley's Wizard Wheezes for a time, but he also took the Auror training alongside Harry. His humour, his loyalty, and his ability to see the ordinary magic in everyday life made him an anchor for the others. He never sought fame, but he understood that the war had changed him, and he wanted to be part of the work that would ensure no family ever had to lose a child again. Together, the three of them became the heart of a reformed ministry that slowly, year by year, shed its old skin. The end of blood prejudice was not a single moment. It was a gradual thaw, like ice breaking on a frozen lake in spring. Wizards who had once hidden their muggle-born neighbours now spoke openly about their heritage. Pure-blood families who had clung to their status began to see that pride in lineage meant nothing when the boy who defeated Voldemort had a muggle mother. The wizarding world did not become perfect overnight, but the poison of blood purity had been drained from its main arteries. The deep-rooted suspicion that had kept Slytherin House isolated for centuries began to fade. New friendships formed across house lines. The Sorting Hat, which had once sung warnings about division, now sang of unity. Hogwarts itself was rebuilt, stone by stone with painstaking care. The fallen walls were raised again, the stained glass windows replaced with images that honoured both the past and the future. A new statue was placed in the entrance hall, not of a founder, but of all those who had given their lives in the battle. Names were carved into a permanent memorial, and every year on the anniversary, students would leave flowers at its base. The school healed slowly, but it healed. The Great Hall no longer felt haunted by the echoes of screams and curses. It became once again a place of feasts and laughter, of quiet study and whispered secrets. And then 19 years later, the cycle turned once more. It was the 1st of September again, and the platform at King's Cross was alive with the same chaos and excitement that had greeted Harry on his first journey to Hogwarts. Steam billowed from the Scarlet Engine. Families said their goodbyes, and the children ran through the barrier with wide eyes and racing hearts. Among them were James Sirius Potter, already a troublemaker in his father's image, and Albus Severus Potter, nervous about being sorted, burdened by the weight of a name that carried both greatness and grief. Their sister Lily Luna was still too young, but she watched with the patience of someone who knew her turn would come. The cyclical nature of history was written into that moment. Harry, now a father with his own scars and his own wisdom, stood beside Ginny, who had lost her brother Fred in the battle and had spent years rebuilding her life as a Quidditch player and a mother. They watched their children board the train, carrying the same trunk Harry had carried, wearing the same robes, heading to the same castle that had been both salvation and battlefield. The war had ended, but the story was never really over. It was passed on, like a torch, to the next generation, who would have to learn their own lessons about courage, sacrifice, and the dangerous seduction of easy answers. Ron and Hermione stood nearby, their daughter Rose already on the train, arguing with her cousin about which house was best. The old debates, the old rivalries, still simmered, but they were softer now. The world had learned that houses did not define a person, that bravery could come from anywhere, and that the greatest magic was not in spells or wands, but in the choices you made when no one was watching. The scar on Harry's forehead had not troubled him for years. It was a pale reminder of a past that still lived in his dreams, but it no longer burned. He had learned to live with the weight of what he had seen, what he had done, and what he had lost. And as the Hogwarts Express pulled away from the platform, carrying his sons into their own adventures, he understood that the legacy of the 19 years later was not about endings. It was about continuity, about the quiet resilience of a world that had faced its darkest hour and chosen to step into the light. The wizarding world changed because it had to. The ministry reformed because people like Hermione would not rest until it did. The Golden Trio grew up, found their places, and raised children who would never know the terror of Voldemort's reign. And yet the cycle of history is a patient river. It bends, it deepens, but it never stops flowing. The children who boarded that train would face their own challenges, their own moments of doubt and triumph. The world they inherited was not perfect, but it was better. And that perhaps is the truest legacy of all. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.